Chapter 4307. Listening to the discussion of the crowd, Lin Yi could not help but feel a chill in his heart. Sure enough, Chu Muqing and Chu Bubi were brothers. No wonder they looked so familiar. No wonder the two of them looked exactly the same, whether it was their appearance or temperament. However, this also proved that Chu Bubi had bad intentions. He obviously had a strong team partner like Chu Muqing, who was also his younger brother, but he did not look for him. Instead, he specifically looked for Guo Dengtao, who was not close to him, and Huang Xiaodao, who was a stranger to him. In the end, it was to gather enough heads for the sacrifice and use everyone's lives to exchange for the infant ginseng. Thinking back to the beginning, in order to deceive everyone, Chu Bubi kept saying that he was the only gold core stage master in the Chu family. He really had ulterior motives. This kind of person ended up being killed by the infant ginseng. He really deserved to die. It was a pity that Guo Dengtao and Wang Feng were kept in the dark. Lin Yi and Huang Xiaotao looked at each other and nodded tacitly. They did not say much, so as not to be heard by others and cause unnecessary trouble. Everyone was talking about it, but Chu Muqing did not have any strange expression. It seemed that he already knew that he had a tri-elemental spirit root. After nodding slightly to the college staff, he turned around and walked to the third stage of the assessment array. During the whole process, Chu Muqing's elegant temperament did not decrease at all. He had the temperament of an expert. On the high platform, the big shots of the college nodded frequently. They could not help but look at him with a bit more praise and recognition. After all, this was the first person with tri-elemental spirit root. Moreover, the temperament itself had already explained this person's development potential to a certain extent. Not to mention anything else, with the same strength, Chu Muqing's temperament was often easier to gain an advantage in a fight. Temperament itself was also a hidden talent, but it was ignored by many people. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Chu Muqing walked step by step to the front of the assessment array. When the examiner nodded, Chu Muqing's figure slightly sank. Then he suddenly soared into the sky and swept one leg in the air. A sharp arc of qi instantly hit the assessment array at a speed that was hard to see with the naked eye. Boom! The assessment array was safe and sound, but when the force spread to the ground, it caused the whole place to tremble. The power was so great that it was shocking. It was a simple and powerful attack. This caused the entire crowd to burst into an uproar. They looked at each other, and their gazes were filled with shock that was difficult to hide. Chu Muqing was able to make such a name for himself in this Jinduan Sea region. His strength was indeed not just for show. Chu Muqing calmly landed on the ground and nodded to the examiner. Then he quietly waited at the side for the results. If it was someone else, like the braided guy from before, they wouldn't be able to do anything. The examiner directly announced his elimination. However, this time, the examiner unexpectedly did not say anything. Instead, he turned his head to look at the high platform. It was clear that, at least to him, Chu Muqing had already passed the test. However, he did not have the right to speak as to which of the Academy bigwigs would take him. He could only wait for the final decision of the Academy bigwigs on the stage. Everyone subconsciously held their breaths as they stared at the words and actions of the elders on the stage. If there were no surprises, the first genius disciple to pass the selection today would be. It was about to be born. The elders of the Academy looked at each other. Their gazes first landed on the three mountain opening stage experts in the middle. Every time they came out to recruit disciples, there was an unwritten rule. That was, those with high strength and status could choose first. If they did not want the disciple, then they could take turns. Among the elders of the Academy, the person with the highest status was none other than the dean, Ling Yuanqing. Next to him were the two vice deans, Wei Hebei and the female mountain opening stage expert. As long as any one of the three of them nodded, Chu Muqing would rise rapidly and become their disciple. At the same time, there would be nothing else for the others to do. Only when all three of them expressed no interest would the elders on the stage have the opportunity to take Chumuching in. After a moment of silence, the Dean Ling Yuanqing did not say anything. The Vice Dean Wei Hebei did not say anything. The remaining female Vice Dean also did not say anything. This meant that the three mountain opening stage bigwigs had no intention of taking Chumuching as their disciple. Below the stage, Chumuching looked at the scene. Although his expression did not change, his heart could not help but sink slightly. A trace of haze flashed across his eyes. He originally thought that with his talent and potential, he should be able to obtain the favor of the three bigwigs. He did not expect that he would fail at the last step, entering the same Morning Star Academy and becoming a disciple of one of the bigwigs, whether it was the mountain opening stage bigwigs or an ordinary profound ascending stage teacher. The difference in status and treatment would be like heaven and earth. No matter where one went, one could not escape the rule of Jianghu, where one's disciple was respected. Even if one's strength and talent were the same, if one had Dean Ling Yuanqing behind his back and the other had an ordinary nascent soul stage instructor behind his back, then their statuses would naturally be worlds apart. Everyone present was well aware of this point, and Chumuching was naturally no exception. Everyone wanted to become the disciple of the three mountain opening stage bigwigs, but it was a pity that it was not easy to move them. Even with Chumuching's talent, it was far from enough. After the three mountain opening stage bigwigs silently expressed their stance, it was the turn of the 7 profound ascending stage experts. If one could obtain their favor, one would also be able to achieve meteoric success in the future. Finally, after the 7 profound ascending stage experts looked at each other, an old man wearing a black school robe nodded towards Chumuching and said, "Chumuching, from now on, you will follow me to train." Hearing this, everyone present was instantly envious. Any profound ascending stage expert, even if placed in the Middle Island, would be a top expert. Although they were much weaker than the 3 mountain opening stage bigwigs to be able to become a disciple of such a strong person, this was already a rare opportunity. Disciple obeys. Chumuching immediately bowed and replied. His tone was still calm, giving people the feeling that he would become a great person in the future. However, when the corner of his eyes swept across Ling Yuanqing and the other 2 mountain opening stage experts, he could not help but have a trace of resentment. In an instant, Chumuching completely became the focus of everyone present. As a famous person in the Zhanduan Sea, he would probably become a true legendary figure from the word of mouth. Everyone was speculating that if one day Chumuching came out from the Morning Star Academy and returned to the Zhanduan Sea, his strength would probably be unparalleled. To be continued. Chapter 4308. Compared to everyone else's focus on Chumuching, Lin Yi didn't have any interest in him other than taking a second glance at him. His only focus was Wang Xinyan. He breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that Xinyan was doing well, but now he had a new problem. He didn't know if he should go and meet Xinyan. Thinking back to the first time he met Tian Chan at the Extreme North Islands auction, Tian Chan didn't acknowledge him from the start. Lin Yi didn't know if Wang Xinyan had similar difficulties. Reuniting with her, just like that, might bring trouble to Xinyan, and that wouldn't be in line with Lin Yi's original intentions. But if he didn't greet her at all, acting as if he didn't see her at all, it'd be too heartless, and Lin Yi wouldn't be willing to do that. To acknowledge or not to acknowledge, this was a problem. Lin Yi couldn't help but fall into a dilemma. Lin Yi was conflicted because of Wang Xinyan's matter. Huang Xiaotao, who was beside him, was also conflicted when she saw his restless expression. She guessed that it was most likely because of the woman on the stage, but she didn't know the specifics. She could only ask Lin Yi himself, and Huang Xiaotao was conflicted as to how she should ask. She had always been thin-skinned. Even though she had such a close relationship with Lin Yi, there were still some things that she couldn't ask. More importantly, she was afraid that if she asked too much or asked the wrong question, it would make Lin Yi feel disgusted. Then it would be too late for regrets. She was different from Wang Xinyan and the other girls in the secular world. She had been educated in ancient etiquette since she was young, and a woman's jealousy was an unforgivable sin. Moreover, she had never had such thoughts, and naturally, she didn't want Lin Yi to misunderstand that she was jealous of the woman on the stage. Just as the two of them were conflicted, a somewhat familiar voice suddenly rang out beside them. "Hey, brother, did you get the test card?" Lin Yi and Huang Xiaotao turned their heads and saw that it was Gu Wei. "Oh yes, got it. Your business is booming today." Lin Yi nodded and looked at Huang Xiaotao in surprise. He thought, "I'm not familiar with this guy. Why did he come back? Wasn't this fellow selling his secret manual for clearing the test? Could it be that he had already sold all of it?" There were close to 10,000 people present. If each person sold 100 spirit jades, it would be a huge business worth hundreds of thousands of spirit jades. He shouldn't have moved so quickly, right? I'm just trying to make a living. How is that a thriving business? Gu Wei smiled and curled his lips. He sighed regretfully. "I was counting on this meticulously compiled secret book to make a fortune. Sigh, what a pity. Your examination clearance secret manual is indeed worth the money. I see that there are quite a lot of people buying secret manuals. Why do you say it's a pity?" Lin Yi and Huang Xiaotao couldn't help but ask curiously. "There are a lot of people buying it, but there's no way to continue selling it. Brother, don't you see that the academy guards are all staring at me?" Gu Wei shook his head and smiled bitterly. If it wasn't for this reason, he would probably be busy for the whole day. But now, if he continued selling, he would probably be arrested on the spot. Once he was convicted of disrupting the order of the selection, he would not be able to walk away scot-free. So, he could only give up on this easy business of earning spirit jades. He came back to chat with Lin Yi, the big spender, and take the opportunity to sell some information. Who knows, he might even be able to earn some more. It could also make up for today's loss. That's true. Lin Yi nodded understandingly. His eyes lit up all of a sudden. He'd been wondering about Wang Xinyan for a while now, but he didn't have anyone around him to ask. This Gu Wei was known as the Detective Gu of Nanzhou, and there was no one more suitable than him for information. Didn't that make him the perfect candidate? "Young hero, do you have something to ask me?" Gu Wei had seen all kinds of people, and he was constantly paying attention to Lin Yi's expression. With one look, he knew that business was coming. "That's right. I do have something I'm puzzled about. I wonder if you can help me?" Lin Yi nodded without hiding anything. Huang Xiaotao listened obediently at the side and didn't make a sound. "Young hero, feel free to ask. I don't dare to say that I know everything, but in the South Continent, there is really nothing that I, Detective Go of the South Continent, don't not know. The only difference is whether I know more or less. Young hero, you found the right person to ask me," Gu Wei immediately said excitedly. He had already seen Lin Yu waving at him. Actually, I just want to ask, why is there such a young girl sitting next to the female vice dean on the stage? I don't think her strength is very high, and she seems to be quite close to the female vice dean. What's the relationship between the two? Lin Yi asked calmly. "Oh, so you're asking about her, young hero." Gu Wei put on a look of realization and laughed in a low voice. If you ask anyone else, I can guarantee that no one would know. After all, this is a matter of the Morning Star Academy in the East Continent. The people here have never even stepped foot in the East Continent, so naturally they wouldn't know about these rumors. Young hero, you found the right person to ask me. Detective Go of the South Continent. Does that mean that you know about it? Lin Yi suddenly became excited. He was very eager to know about Wang Xinyan no matter what. Even if it was just a rumor, he wanted to hear it. Yes, of course, but this... Gu Wei didn't say it directly, but rubbed his fingers. His meaning was obvious. He had to pay Ling Yu. The so-called South Continent's Gu Inquirer relied on collecting and selling information for a living. This was his line of work. Of course, there was no reason for him to divulge information to others for free. Otherwise, if he went around being a good person, wouldn't he be starving? Although Lin Yi had given him an extra 30 high-grade spiritual jades when he bought the test clearance manual, this was a different matter. This was a business, and Ge Wei wouldn't break the rules for no reason. That would be asking for trouble. Lin Yi nodded and immediately took out a small bag of spiritual jades from his bag. Ge Wei roughly weighed it in his hand. There were more than 10 of them, and they were all high-grade spiritual jades. He immediately smiled in satisfaction. Young hero, you have an impressive appearance, and you're a talented person. You purposely asked me about this girl. I believe you have feelings for her? Ge Wei said with a smile, that's true. She's such a beautiful goddess, and she's also the disciple of the East Sea divine nun. There are countless young heroes who admire her. Any normal man would be unable to avoid this. Chapter 4309. Divine Nun of the Eastern Sea? Who's that? Lin Yi was stunned. He had watched plenty of wuxia novels and TV shows when he was bored in the secular world. There was a divine nun of the Southern Sea in The Return of the Condor Heroes, but that was a made-up expert. Why was there a divine nun of the Eastern Sea on Heaven Stage Island? Young hero, you don't even know this? The divine nun of the Eastern Sea. Isn't that the female vice dean on stage? Ge Wei glanced at Lin Yi strangely. Perhaps everyone present did not know who Wang Xinyan was, but there were very few people who did not know who the divine nun of the Eastern Sea was. After all, she was the same as the Dean Ling Yuanqing. They were both famous figures of the Morning Star Academy. She's the divine nun of the Eastern Sea? Lin Yi was even more stunned. Although he had guessed it before, he still could not help but jump in fright when he learned that Wang Xinyan was the female vice dean's disciple. As a newcomer from the secular world who was not even a foundation establishment cultivator a year ago, she was actually able to become the disciple of a great foundation establishment cultivator like the divine nun of the Eastern Sea. Now, she even had the powerful strength of an early nascent soul cultivator. Wang Xinyan's luck was truly astounding. Lin Yi felt that his various experiences and progress in strength were already heaven-defying and extraordinary enough. Ordinary people would not even dare to imagine it, but compared to Wang Xinyan, he paled in comparison. There was no comparison at all. It turned out that his confidant was the true prodigy. Yes, not only is she the disciple of the divine nun of the Eastern Sea, but she's also the only direct disciple the divine nun of the Eastern Sea has ever taken in. It's rumored that the divine nun of the Eastern Sea views her as the apple of her eye. She's probably her own daughter, Ge Wei said frankly to Lin Yi and Huang Xiaotao. As a result, because of the divine nun of the Eastern Sea standing behind her, her status in the Morning Star Academy, and even in the entire Highland Sea of the Eastern continent, is extremely revered. She's one of the 3 fairies of the Highland Sea, and her name is Wang Xinyan. 3rd fairy? Lin Yi was stunned. That's right. The 3 fairies are publicly acknowledged by the entire Gaolin Sea region. They possess both beauty and strength. Moreover, all of them possess powerful backgrounds. All the disciples of the various academies in the Gaolin Sea region admire and pursue them. It would not be an exaggeration to say that they are the goddesses of the entire Gaolin Sea region, Ge Wei said with a look of admiration. I see. Lin Yi nodded in realization. According to this, the 3rd fairy should stand at the top of all the female practitioners in the East Continent's Highland Sea. Wang Xinyan was born in the common world, but she was able to stand among them. She could be considered a legend. There are countless geniuses in the East Continent's Gaolin Sea, and the 3 fairies are the goddesses of their dreams. There are even people who set up bets. Let's see who will get the 3rd fairy in the end. Although he was selling information to Lin Yi, Ge Wei was also enjoying himself when he talked about these things. There's still someone who wants to open a bet. Lin Yi raised his eyebrows slightly. That's right. The trend is getting more and more intense. and it has already swept through the entire Gaolin Sea region. Young masters from rich families, geniuses with heaven-defying talent, supermasters ranked first in the Academy's combat strength leaderboard are all on the list, and they have all launched an attack on the 3 fairies. I heard that someone is about to get her. Gu Wei knew these rumors like the back of his hand. The East Continent was thousands of miles away from the South Continent, so he had no idea where he heard this from. These people sure have nothing better to do. Lin smiled faintly unconcerned. Flowers would inevitably attract butterflies no matter where they went, but he had absolute confidence in Wang Xinyan. No matter how much effort those people put in, Wang Xinyan, one of the 3 fairies, was already taken. If Wang Xinyan's situation was like Tian Chan and Sydney's, Lin Yi would really be worried because others might force themselves on her. However, Wang Xinyan was the 3rd fairy and the only direct disciple of the divine nun of the East Sea. Who would dare to force her? Therefore, Lin Yi didn't have much to worry about. After all, a master in the mountain opening stage would definitely be at the top no matter where he went. No one would dare to provoke such a tiger's whiskers. It's boring, but the bed itself can actually show the voice of the top young masters in the East Continent's Gaolin Sea region. If there's a chance to go there, pay some attention. It's a good reference. Gu Wei smiled. That's true. Lin Yi didn't refute. At least for now, he had no plans to go to the East Continent, so Gu Wei's reminder wasn't very useful. He only needed to know that Wang Xinyan was doing well. After all, with his current strength, even if he went to the East Continent, he wouldn't be able to protect Wang Xinyan. He might even bring trouble to her. Instead of adding to her troubles, it was better to increase his strength first. By the way, this 3rd fairy, Wang Xinyan, came out later than her master, the divine nun of the East Sea and the Dianling Yuanqing. Won't she be punished for being so disrespectful in such an important occasion? Lin Yi asked. The only thing he cared about was whether Wang Xinyan would be wronged. Young hero, you really care about this 3rd fairy. It's human nature, human nature. Gu Wei smiled mischievously. If this happened to someone else, they would definitely be punished. After all, the rules of the school are more important than Mount Tai. Every school is very particular about this, but Wang Xinyan is different. She is the only direct disciple of the divine nun of the East Sea. She is the pearl of the palm of the divine nun of the East Sea. Who would criticize her over such a small matter? That might not be the case. After all, there are big figures like Ling Yuanqing and Wei Hebei here. No matter how protective the divine nun of the East Sea is, she still has to consider their faces. Even if it's just a formality, she still has to punish Wang Xinyan. Lin Yi was still a little worried. Indeed, the divine nun of the East Sea might not want to punish Wang Xinyan, but her mentality was like that of a parent. If their child made a mistake, they had to express it in front of other parents. Young hero, there is something you don't know. The 3rd fairy, Wang Xinyan's position in the Morning Star Academy, isn't as simple as being the only direct disciple of the divine nun of the East Sea. With her extraordinary talent, even someone like the Dianling Yuanqing is very protective of her. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that she is the hope of the entire Morning Star Academy. Moreover, she came out so late. Either she was cultivating or she was delayed by something. Why would these big shots punish her over such a small matter? Gu Wei shook his head. Floating astronomy. Chapter 43:10. Oh. Lin Yi nodded and let out a sigh of relief. From the looks of it, Wang Xinyan was probably the one who lived the best life out of all the beauties he had met in the secular world. At the same time, she was also the luckiest one. Of course, all of this was due to her unique talent. If her talent was ordinary, she wouldn't have caught the eye of the divine nun of the Eastern Sea. Naturally, she wouldn't have received the protection of so many important people. But it's a pity. Gu Wei suddenly shook his head in pity. What's a pity? Lin, he couldn't help but ask. Although everyone knows that one of the three fairies, Wang Xinyan, is extraordinarily talented, the Morning Star Academy is very tight-lipped about what her talent is, other than the dean and vice dean. Even the higher-ups of the academy don't know. This has already become an unsolved mystery in the East Continent's Highland Sea. If anyone could find out the inside story, just this information alone would be worth a lot of spiritual jades. TSK, TSK. Gu Wei shook his head and sighed. Gathering information was his specialty. This feeling of knowing that there was a secret, but not being able to find out, was like 100 claws scratching at his heart. With his various methods of gathering information in the South Continent, if he was in the Highland Sea of the East Continent, no matter how secretive the information was, he would still be able to find out. Unfortunately, he was in the South Continent and couldn't easily go to the East Continent. They were separated by thousands of miles, so what could he do? Lin Yi heard this and smiled inwardly. Outsiders like Gu Wei didn't know how talented Wang Xinyan was, but he knew it like the back of his hand. Wang Xinyan's spiritual root was extremely special. It wasn't one of the traditional 5 elements, but a special body type in the secular world, the sponge body type. Strictly speaking, the sponge body type was a type of spiritual root, and it was an extremely rare, mutated spiritual root. It was mentioned in Gu Wei's assessment manual that anyone with a mutated spiritual root was a rare genius in the world. Those with mutated spiritual roots could directly enter the academy without selection and receive the treatment of a real genius disciple. As for the sponge physique, even among all the mutated spirit roots, it was an extremely rare existence. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was the mutated spirit root of all mutated spirit roots. Wang Xinyan was able to receive so much attention and even obtain such a high position in Morning Star Academy. Although it was unexpected, it was also reasonable. Lin Yi nodded to himself. From the looks of it, as long as one's talent reached a certain level, even the iron rules of Morning Star Academy could be ignored. A genius like Wang Xinyan would be treated like a treasure in any other academy in the Eastern Continent. While Lin Yi and Gu Wei were talking, they arrived before the stone tablet for testing spiritual roots. After Chu Muqing's tri-spirit root, another extraordinary existence appeared. Metal, fire, earth, 3 solid spirit roots, with spirit roots, a total of 4 spirit roots. This time, it was a staff member of the academy. There was an unconcealable shock in his tone. Even if the wood element was a pseudo-spiritual root, it was still a true 4-element spiritual root. With such talent, even the earlier Chu Muqing was suppressed by him. Even in the Morning Star Academy, where there were many geniuses, it was considered to be the best and was enough to be taken out. Ha ha ha. My old man was right. I am indeed the chosen one. This time, there is hope for our Chiu clan to prosper. This man had short hair like a porcupine, and his exposed muscles were lean and strong. Although his clothes were expensive, his entire body was emitting a thick aura of a nouveau riche. No one knew where he came from, but now that he suddenly heard that he was a genius with 4 spiritual roots, he immediately became insolent. Seeing this scene, the people in the audience could not bring themselves to despise him. Even if they knew that he was a country bumpkin, he was still a country bumpkin with 4 spiritual roots. This kind of talent was something they wanted even in their dreams. But it was a pity that they did not have this life. At this time, they could not even be envious of him. So how could they despise him? If someone really showed disdain, it would only be said that they were jealous, and they would be laughed at by others. Even if he was a country bumpkin now, with this kind of talent, he was destined to have a meteoric rise. In the future, his level would be far beyond the reach of others, so there was no need to look for trouble. Suddenly, a genius with 4 spiritual roots appeared. At this moment, even the big shots of the academy on the high platform had their eyes focused on the man with the hedgehog hair. The 3rd round of the test had not yet begun, but some of them were already looking at him fervently, as if they wanted to take him under their wing. The porcupine headman's face was filled with pride. At this time he was being watched by many elders, but he did not have the slightest bit of stage fright. He walked to the front of the array for the third test, and without waiting for the examiner to speak, he used his chi and fiercely punched. Seeing this, the examiner's expression could not help but change. However, he did not say anything to reprimand him. Instead, just like Chumuching, he turned his head to look at the stage. After all, with the talent of 4 spiritual roots, although this porcupine head man's strength was not as valiant as Chumuching's to the point of being able to fight opponents of a higher level, he was still stronger than ordinary experts of the same level. With Chumuching's admission as a precedent, everyone below the stage could more or less see the door. They knew that this porcupine head man would definitely be able to enter the Morning Star Academy. However, as for which sect he would be under, it would still depend on whether the elders of the academy were interested in him or not. Among the 3 mountain opening stage giants, the Dean Ling Yuanqing did not have any intention of expressing his position. On the side, the divine nun of the Eastern Sea was talking to Wang Xinyan. She did not even look at the porcupine head man. The only one left was Wei Hebei. Wei Hebei sized up the porcupine head man. Having 4 spiritual roots had truly moved him. If he was nurtured well, he would not dare to say that he would become a pillar of the academy, but his strength would not be too bad. Just from this point alone, he was worth taking in. In any case, 1 more wouldn't make much of a difference. However, the temperament and cultivation that this porcupine head man had displayed did not seem to be someone capable of great things. If he had the temperament of an expert like Chumuching, Wei Hebei reckoned that he would have immediately made the decision. However, seeing the arrogant behavior of the porcupine head man, if he were to rashly accept him and end up as a failure, he would become the laughingstock of the Morning Star Academy. Wouldn't that ruin Wei Hebei's illustrious reputation? Wei Hebei could not help but hesitate. He had not accepted a disciple for 3 years in a row. Now that he had 4 spiritual roots in front of him, it would be a pity if he were to give up. However, if he were to accept him, he was afraid that this guy would not be able to rise up. It would be a pity to abandon him, but it would be tasteless. This porcupine head was practically useless. Floating astronomy. Chapter 43:11. The profound ascending stage experts on the side were already eager to give it a try. Even if the 3 heavyweights of the mountain opening stage didn't want him, they wouldn't despise him. After all, he was a genius with 4 spiritual roots. As long as they put in some effort, he would still have a chance. Forget it, just give me a name. Wei Hebei finally made his decision. The other profound ascending stage experts couldn't help but sigh in regret. It was hard to find a genius disciple, but they were not fated to have him. As soon as these words came out, everyone immediately went into an uproar. This hedgehog man was the 2nd lucky person to pass the selection after Chumuching. Moreover, he was the disciple of one of the 3 heavyweights of the mountain opening stage, Wei Hebei. His future was absolutely limitless. Lin, he didn't think much of it as he watched the man with the hedgehog hair proudly waving his hands. However, he still asked without batting an eyelid. He has the talent of a quadruple spirit root, and he's also the disciple of Wei Hebei. If he goes to the Eastern Continent's Morning Star Academy, he'll probably be a genius disciple that'll be heavily nurtured. Wouldn't his status be comparable to the 3rd goddess, Wang Xinyan? Saying that he is a genius with 4 spiritual roots is barely acceptable, but to say that he will be specially nurtured by the academy is a bit far off. As for comparing him to the 3rd fairy Wang Xinyan, then I can only laugh and not say anything. Gu Wei heard this and immediately laughed. The ridicule on his face was obvious. Oh, could it be that it isn't so? Lin, he couldn't help but ask curiously, although he didn't think that this hedgehog-haired man would be able to accomplish much. Since he was personally named by Wei Hebei, he would be given a place to focus on nurturing after entering Morning Star Academy. Of course not. He is a genius here. But once he goes to the Morning Star Academy, he will be nothing. In the end, he is just a person with 4 spiritual roots, and one of them is a pseudo-attribute. There are not many people like this in the Morning Star Academy. There is nothing special about him. Gu Wei shook his head and asserted, "Oh, since his talent is so common, why would Wei Hebei take a liking to him? As the vice dean of the mountain opening stage, your foresight should be much higher than that of a normal instructor, right?" Lin Yi said doubtfully. "I also find it strange. Normally, this kind of person should not be noticed by the giants of the mountain opening stage. After all, he is not a genius with mutated spiritual root. However, how can we ordinary people guess the thoughts of the big shots? Perhaps Wei Hebei had other intentions. I've heard that he hasn't accepted any disciples in several years. Perhaps it's because his sect is deserted. Maybe we can find someone to make up the numbers." Gu Wei rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Find someone to make up the numbers. When Lin Yi heard this, he looked at the complacent hedgehog head with a strange expression. Thinking back to Wei Hebei's earlier hesitation, it seemed that this was indeed possible. He couldn't help but laugh. If that's the case, then Wei Hebei is really lucky to be able to climb up to such a high branch for such a baffling reason. Lucky? Gu Wei pursed his lips and said disapprovingly, "That's not necessarily so. If we really want to talk about strength, this guy is much weaker than Chu Muqing. A place like the Morning Star Academy was filled with crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Even if Chu Muqing went there, he might not be able to obtain any benefits. He had to tuck his tail between his legs and keep a low profile. Brother, look at this guy. Do you think he knows what it means to keep a low profile? That's going to be difficult." Lin Yi shook his head repeatedly, looking at Hedgehog Head's posture. His tail was about to reach the sky. If even this fellow knew how to keep a low profile, then Earth would have long been at peace. That's why I said that if this kind of person doesn't have the strength, then he will lose everything. Secondly, you don't know how to keep a low profile. You have 4 spiritual roots, but in a dangerous place like Morning Star Academy, do you think you'll be of much use?" Gu Wei said with a smile, "Then isn't he still Wei Hebei's disciple? With Wei Hebei's name, he should be quite popular in Morning Star Academy, right?" Lin Yi was still doubtful. As the saying goes, when beating a dog, one must look at its owner. No matter what, this hedgehog head was Wei Hebei's disciple. He wouldn't be easily bullied, right? Hee, Wei Hebei's name can indeed scare a lot of people. But how many of those who can enter Morning Star Academy are truly easy to deal with? Who knows, there might even be people who, in order to fight for a position, would look for this kind of person who is backed by a big shot but is actually a pushover. Gu Wei shook his head and laughed. The risk isn't small. Would there be people who would take such a risk out of desperation? Lin Yi asked curiously. Of course. You must know that a sect's cultivation resources are limited. Even the Morning Star Academy is no exception. If someone takes more, there will naturally be someone who takes less. The competition is quite intense. Furthermore, the more talented a person is, the easier it is for others to gang up on him or even kill him. That's because that way he will have more cultivation resources to spare. Gu Wei said as he pointed at Hedgehog Head. With a face full of confidence, he said, "Look at how proud he is right now. When he goes to Morning Star Academy, he definitely won't be able to cry even if he wants to. Who knows, he might even be killed in 2 days." Killed by someone? That can't be. Lin Yi's heart trembled when he heard this. With Wang Xinyan's example in front of him, he had taken it for granted that as long as a genius disciple went to Morning Star Academy, they would be heavily nurtured and stand out. Most of the people present also had this kind of thinking. How can it not be? Brother, don't doubt me. Reality is just this cruel. I only said so much because we hit it off. If it was someone else, I wouldn't waste so much breath. As Gu Wei said this, he suddenly became somewhat indignant and said, "That hedgehog head just now, his eyes were all the way up to his forehead. I was kind enough to sell him the exam clearance secret manual. But not only did he disdain it, he almost attracted the attention of the Academy's guards and ruined my business. Otherwise, I could have warned him a few words. At least he wouldn't have died so quickly. But now, humph, Lin finally understood. No wonder Go-Wei disliked that hedgehog head so much. It turned out that there was such a grudge between them. I'm not exaggerating. In the past 100 years, if not 1,000 geniuses from our South Continent went to East Continent Academy to study. There are at least 800, if not 1,000. But more than half of them were set up and targeted shortly after they went there and eventually died. Gu-wei said with a serious face, in a place like East Continent Academy, unless you are really tyrannical and strong enough to crush all the geniuses around you, everyone else has to follow the rules there. Otherwise, you're really not far from death. Hearing this, a person appeared in Lin Yi's mind. Ram Jia, the head of the North Island's Law Enforcement Hall. Although they had never fought and had only met face to face once, Lin Yi's intuition told him that this person should be the kind of genius who could crush all the existences around him. Floating astronomy. Chapter 43:12. For someone like Ram Jia, no matter where he went, he could do whatever he wanted. Even if he went to the academies in the East Continent where there were hidden dragons and crouching tigers, he would not be an exception. Of course, even geniuses have to learn to cling to thighs when they get there and learn to live an ignoble life. If they don't have any ability and still have a proud and arrogant attitude, they will probably be played to death very quickly. This hedgehog head probably won't be able to escape that fate. Gu-wei sneered. So, according to you, unless they are extremely powerful, the more conspicuous a genius is, the easier it is for them to die? Lin raised his eyebrows slightly. That's right, that's what I mean. Of course, if you don't fight for anything after you get there, and keep a low profile, don't think that you're talented enough to chase after the third fairy. If you don't do stupid things like that, you'll be able to live longer. Otherwise, you won't even know how you die. Gu-wei sighed. This was a far cry from what Lin Yi had expected. He thought that since it was an academy, everyone should be focused on practicing and the atmosphere should be peaceful and serene. He didn't think that this Gu-wei from the South Continent would be talking about such a cruel place. It was practically a storm of blood and carnage. Looking at it this way, the North Island welcoming pavilion was like a greenhouse. Doesn't the Academy care about this? It took so much effort to recruit a few genius disciples, but in the end, they were killed by their own people. How can this be justified? Lin Yi was puzzled. Care? How can we care? Gu-wei said disapprovingly, those who can secretly attack, how can they be easy to deal with? They are all geniuses among geniuses. Moreover, if there is no competition, how can they produce stronger and more outstanding disciples? Those who can survive the plots of others and now can bully and plot against others all day long. Which one of them did not kill their way out of a pack of wolves and tigers? That's true, but in this way, if each batch suppresses the previous batch, won't the newcomers never have a chance to shine? Lin Yi could not help but wonder. That's not necessarily true. As long as you can persevere, even in a place like Morning Star Academy, you can still make a name for yourself. It's just that you need the right timing, the right place, and the right people. Gu-wei explained, not only does this kind of person need to have sufficient strength and capital, but they also need to be able to catch up with the right timing. For example, the batch of geniuses who were originally suppressed above their heads have already grown to a new realm, or they have taken up an important position in the academy. Otherwise, they would have already gone to a higher-ranked academy to train and cultivate. This way, there would naturally be a batch of empty seats, and the newcomers would naturally be able to occupy them. This sounds like a difficult task. The competition is really intense. Lin Yi couldn't help but smile and sigh. That's right. That's why I said that for someone like Hedgehog Head who doesn't have much ability, but has eyes on the top of his head, to go to Morning Star Academy, I'm willing to bet that he won't live for more than 3 months, or else Gu-wei will eat shit on the spot. Wei said with certainty. Brother Ge, a word of advice. I felt that even if Morningstar Academy was really that dangerous, Hedgehog Head was still Wei Hebei's disciple. Even if others targeted him, he wouldn't be able to escape. Even if others target him, I reckon that at most they will bully him and teach him a lesson. They won't directly kill him. If this matter were to blow up, it would be the same as slapping Wei Hebei's master in the face. Would Wei Hebei let them off? Or could it be that these people are already strong enough to contend against Wei Hebei, a mountain opening stage powerhouse? Lin Yi didn't agree with this. No matter what, Hedgehog Head had been labeled as Wei Hebei's disciple. If that was the case, then he would be Wei Hebei's subordinate. Even if it was purely out of consideration for his face, Wei Hebei wouldn't allow his subordinates to be killed. To him, the Academy's vice headmaster, this was a challenge to his authority, a slap to his face. Brother, there's nothing wrong with what you think. However, you've overlooked something. Do you still remember what Wei Hebei said just now? Wei suddenly laughed. If it was Wei Hebei, didn't he just accept Hedgehog Head as his disciple? Lin Yi frowned. That's what he meant. However, brother, you must know that disciples are also divided into different ranks. Wei Hebei did accept him, but he was only an unofficial disciple that wasn't valued. Ge Wei repeatedly shook his head. Hearing this, Lin Yi finally reacted. According to the tradition of the cultivation world, an unofficial disciple didn't have much of a status. For a mountain opening stage powerhouse like Wei Hebei, he has at least a few dozen in-name disciples. You might not even see him once every 10 days or half a month, let alone receive any attention from him. Who would care that much? Ge Wei spoke with fervor and assurance. If something really happened to Hedgehog Head, Wei Hebei would definitely be furious. However, brother, how much do you think he would care? The person who dared to make a move against Hedgehog Head definitely wouldn't have a weak background. In the end, it's highly likely that both sides would secretly make a deal and leave it unsettled. In the end, Hedgehog Head would have died in vain. That's true. Lin Yi nodded in agreement, as expected of someone who specialized in gathering information. Ge Wei's analysis really did make sense. Brother, didn't you just ask me if Hedgehog Head's status would be comparable to third fairy Wang Xinyan's if he became Wei Hebei's disciple? Ge Wei chuckled and said, they're both mountain opening stage powerhouses, but one of them is an unimportant, unofficial disciple, while the other is the only direct disciple. The difference in status is like heaven and earth. They can't even be mentioned in the same breath. If it was someone like Wang Xinyan, then no one would dare to provoke her. Anyone who provokes her would be provoking the divine nun of the Eastern Sea. That would truly be a tragic death. Oh, right. As a mountain opening stage powerhouse, why does the divine nun of the Eastern Sea only have a single direct disciple? Lin Yi thought of something and asked. I really haven't looked into this in detail, but I can roughly guess that there are only 2 reasons. The first is that the divine nun of the Eastern Sea is a female cultivator, so she only accepts female disciples. Just that alone excludes all male cultivators. The second reason is that she has high standards. Someone with a so-called quadruple spiritual root, like Hedgehog Head, is completely beneath her notice. Only those with mutated spiritual roots will be accepted. Ge Wei guessed and analyzed. Lin Yi nodded. If there were no surprises, it should be because of these 2 reasons. This was quite good. At the very least, the divine nun of the Eastern Sea would pay special attention to Wang Xinyan, so she would not be bullied or wronged. Floating astronomy. Chapter 40, 3:13. Bro, I've noticed that you're really interested in that third goddess, Wang Xinyan. You want to know everything about her. TSK, TSK. Ge Wei had a playful expression on his face as he winked at him. Then he sternly reminded, however, since we hit it off so well, I'll give you a piece of advice. It's fine if you fantasize about it, but don't take it seriously. Especially if you can pass the selection, don't even think about it. Think about what I just said. This isn't a joke. You'll really lose your life. Thank you for your reminder, Brother Ge. I know what I'm doing. Lin Yi said gratefully. Although it was the first time they met, he could tell that Ge Wei's reminder was sincere. This guy was not bad. Actually, although Lin Yi did not plan to go to the East Continent, after seeing Wang Xinyan, it would be a lie to say that he was not tempted at all. No matter what, the East Continent was one of the 5 heaven-rank islands, and there were so many experts. To people like Lin Yi, it was an unparalleled attraction. Moreover, there was Wang Xinyan. Moreover, if Lin Yi really wanted to go, it was actually very simple. He had the 5 elements and 7 attributes, and could be said to be a nature-defying spiritual route. Once he showed it, it would definitely blind everyone's eyes. Even the dean, Ling Yuanqing, who was at the mountain opening stage, would be shocked and lose his composure. It was too easy to be chosen. At that time, Lin Yi could easily get a position as the direct disciple of a mountain opening stage giant. Even if his position could not be compared to Wang Xinyan, who was the only direct disciple, he should still be at the top of all the disciples in the Morning Star Academy. However, after listening to Ge Wei's words, Lin Yi knew that things were not as simple as he thought. Even if he went to the Morning Star Academy, even if he could become the direct disciple of a mountain opening stage giant, the situation would definitely not be optimistic. After all, he was different from Wang Xinyan. She was the divine nun of the East Sea's only direct disciple, and she would take care of her meticulously. Moreover, she was publicly acknowledged as the 3rd fairy. Regular male cultivators could not wait to admire her, let alone do anything to her. However, if it was Lin Yi, he would not receive the same treatment as Wang Xinyan. What was unavoidable was that Lin Yi would definitely become the target of the other disciples. He would become the target of the other disciples, regardless of strength or potential. Lin Yi could be said to be invincible among those of the same level, and he could even instantly kill those of a higher level. However, no matter how powerful he was, no matter how capable he was, it was impossible for him to deal with a group of people. Just as Ge Wei had said, those who were able to bully the other disciples in the Morning Star Academy were not easy to deal with. In the end, they were all rare geniuses. It was just that they weren't as exaggerated as Lin Yi. Lin Yi had no problem dealing with 2 or 3 of them. But what if there were 20 or 30 of them, or even more? That was not all. If Lin Yi went to the Morning Star Academy, his relationship with Wang Xinyan would inevitably be exposed, and he would have to face enemies by then. It would not be as simple as 20 or 30. Wang Xinyan was one of the 3rd fairies, the goddess that all the disciples in the East Continent's Gaolin Sea area admired and yearned for. Almost all the top geniuses in the Gaolin Sea area were on the list. If the matter between Lin Yi and Wang Xinyan really got out, he would definitely become the public enemy. Not to mention 20 or 30. Even 200 or 300 would be considered a small number. Compared to the fierce competition, Lin Yi's experience in the North Island's 3 great pavilions was not even worth mentioning. When he was in the North Island's 3 great pavilions, he could still pretend to be stupid. But if he went to the East Continent, he would not even have to think about it. The only way was to fight to the death. Strength. Lin Yi suddenly clenched his fists. He had to be so cautious because his current strength was too weak. He could still make a living in the North Island, but if he wanted to go to the East Continent, his strength was far from enough. Otherwise, if he was also a powerful mountain opening stage master, he would not have to worry about anything. He could just stand out now and take Wang Xinyan away in front of everyone, and no one would dare to say anything. He believed that even someone like Ling Yuanqing would not rashly make an enemy of a mountain opening stage master. Instead, he would be polite and talk things over. But now it was all a daydream. Not only could Lin Yi not do anything, he could not even acknowledge Wang Xinyan in front of everyone. He could only watch from afar and comfort himself that there was still a long way to go. But the only thing that comforted Lin Yi was that Wang Xinyan was doing quite well now. There was no danger to speak of, and he did not have to worry too much about her. Even if she did not acknowledge him in front of everyone, it would not be a problem. In this way, Lin Yi was even more determined to give up the idea of going to the East Continent. He wanted to acknowledge Wang Xinyan. His priority now was to improve his strength. Only when he was strong enough could he reveal his relationship with Wang Xinyan to the public. However, just when Lin Yi made up his mind, there was a sudden uproar at the selection site. According to the normal order, there was a cultivator who was going to be tested in front of him. He hesitated for a moment and suddenly changed his mind. He said to the college staff beside him, "I won't participate in the selection." With that, he threw the test card in his hand aside and turned to leave. However, the college staff beside him suddenly made things difficult. "Humph, you come and go as you please? Do you think this is your home?" Accompanied by the cold snort of the college staff, a strong wave of spiritual chi shot up into the sky before that person could reply. Then, without saying a word, it directly hit that person's body. That person was just an ordinary mid-stage golden core expert, but this college staff was a real mid-stage nascent soul expert. The difference in strength between them was so great that it could not be compared at all. Caught off guard, that person did not even have time to react, let alone defend himself. He was directly hit by the powerful spiritual chi. Accompanied by a miserable cry, his whole body was like a kite with a broken string, flying over the heads of the crowd for more than 10 meters. He forcefully smashed a deep hole in the ground, leaving behind a shrill mist of blood above the heads of the crowd. Then there was an uproar. Everyone was dumbfounded as they looked at the unlucky person who was sent flying. At this moment, he fell to the ground in a mess, twitching and struggling, unable to get up for a long time. Floating astronomy. Chapter 40, 3:14. A busybody went up to check, then turned to the onlookers and said with a gloating expression, "Tikeh, all the meridians in his limbs are broken. This guy can be considered a cripple. Little." Everyone couldn't help but look at each other. Giving up halfway wasn't a big deal. It was nothing more than giving up. Even if there was a punishment, it would at most be a formality. They really didn't expect the academy staff to be so ruthless. Humph, a mere ant at the peak of the Foundation establishment realm dares to impersonate and sign up. This is just a small warning. Since you're ready to sign up, think carefully. If anyone dares to disturb the selection and waste everyone's time, I won't be merciful next time. The staff of the academy coldly said to everyone. Such an obvious example of killing the chicken to warn the monkey caused everyone to subconsciously shrink their necks. Everyone came to a realization. No wonder this person suddenly hesitated at the last moment. He was just a Foundation establishment realm expert, yet he dared to impersonate in such an occasion. They didn't know what was wrong with this guy's brain. He really deserved to be crippled. However, at this moment, in the crowd, Lin Yi couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart when he saw this scene. He lowered his head to look at the test token in his hand and immediately broke out in a cold sweat. Looking at this situation, could it be that he couldn't even give up halfway? Unlike that Foundation establishment realm expert, although Lin Yi met all the requirements for the selection, he didn't intend to participate in the selection. Wouldn't he be following in that person's footsteps? If he didn't receive the test token in his hand, it wouldn't be a problem. However, the problem now was that because he didn't pay too much attention just now, he and Huang Xiaotao were both given test tokens. Brother Ge, don't tell me that I can't give up on participating in the selection after receiving the test token? Can't we even voluntarily give up? Lin Yi took a deep breath and asked Ge Wei, who was standing at the side and watching the show. This guy was the king of information. He should be very clear about these things. Of course not. Since we've already received the test token, we have to participate in the selection. Ge Wei replied matter-of-factly, "Brother, think about it. There are nearly 10,000 people here. How much work would it take to arrange for so many people to participate in the selection? If you don't plan to do that, then why did you go and get the test card? Isn't that just causing trouble for others?" Ah, that seems to be the case. Lin Yi couldn't help but grin speechlessly, secretly regretting being too careless just now. If only he knew this would happen. Previously, when the academy staff threw the test token at the two of them, they should have returned it. Now, what was originally an insignificant test token had now become a hot potato that could be easily spread out. Some people only have themselves to blame. I don't know if their brains have been kicked by a donkey or if they've gotten water in them. They even want to fish in troubled waters. Didn't they think about the possibility of success? In the end, he could only be like that guy, only to realize that he was hopelessly stupid at the last moment. It was too late to regret, even if he wanted to, so he could only give him 2 words. Serves you right. Gu Wei didn't even look at Lin Yi's expression at the moment and continued to ramble on. If that person didn't go back on his words and brace himself to participate in the selection, I would have been able to defeat him. What would have happened if he had gone on stage and was found to be at the foundation establishment great perfection? Or would he have been beaten into a cripple like just now? Lin Yi continued to ask. That wouldn't have happened. If that was the case, it would only be considered as a failure in the selection and wouldn't have ended up like this. Of course, this kind of person would still be considered to have committed a crime knowingly and would eventually be blacklisted by the academy, never to be accepted again. Gu Wei shook his head, then immediately curled his lips and said, That's why I said that this kind of person is hopelessly stupid. Even if he brace himself to participate in the selection, at most he would be blacklisted. How could he be beaten into such a miserable state? TSK. Oh, then what if he was chosen? Can he not join the academy? Lin Yi asked. Of course not. If you didn't have the intention to join the Morningstar Academy, why did you get the test card? Participating in the selection under the watchful eyes of so many people, and then not going after being chosen. What is this? Is this a public provocation to the Morningstar Academy? Gu Wei was speechless. I don't think it's a challenge to the school. Maybe he changed his mind halfway or something. Lin, he said awkwardly, that still won't do. No matter what the original intention is, if this kind of thing happens, it will be a blow to the reputation of the Morningstar Academy. It will be gossiped about by outsiders. Strictly speaking, this is much worse than what that idiot did just now. If this kind of person was only crippled of his cultivation, it would be considered light. If it was more severe, he would probably die on the spot. Gu Wei said with a face of certainty. Hearing this, Lin Yi was even more speechless. His back was already drenched in cold sweat. Listening to Gu Wei's words, it seemed like he had pushed himself into a pit of fire today. It was too late to turn back now. I say, brother, you're not thinking of going back on your words halfway, right? Don't tell me you're like that guy. You're not strong enough and are afraid? Gu Wei suddenly reacted and sized up Lin Yi suspiciously. No, I'm just asking casually. I'm a genuine golden core expert. Lin Yi quickly waved his hands. I think you're the same. It's good that you're fine. Otherwise, if you really met with this kind of bad luck, no one would be able to save you. Gu Wei reminded with a deeper meaning. I know. Lin Yi nodded as if nothing had happened. But at this moment, his heart had already sunk to the bottom of the valley. Ever since he came to the southern island, other than meeting that idiot Chang Ketian, everything else had been smooth sailing. Not to mention the infant ginseng, the 10,000 crossing golden core fruit, and the star ink milk, he had also accidentally reunited with the fire lion and the giant spider. Now, he even saw Wang Xinyan, who he had been thinking about day and night. Everything looked beautiful, but now, just because of an accident, he had been forced into such an awkward situation. It was really a pain in the ass. Just because he didn't return the test token in time, he couldn't leave. Lin Yi had never thought that he would be in such a terrible situation. Turning his head to look at his surroundings, he saw that the entire square was under the control of the Morningstar Academy, and all of them were nascent soul experts. It was impossible to sneak out from under their noses. there was only one type of person who could leave the square, and that was those who were not selected. Other than that, no one else was allowed to enter or leave. This time, Lin Yi's good mood had completely turned into a haze. He was in a dilemma. The situation was very tricky. Chapter 40, 3:15. If he gave up halfway, he would follow in the footsteps of the person just now. He had already made his threat, and there were so many experts in the Morning Star Academy that they could not ignore it. Being crippled would be a light punishment, and if they really fought, it would definitely be a greeting to death. But if he did not give up halfway, with Lin Yi's heaven-defying aptitude of the 5 elements and 7 attributes, it would be strange if he did not cause a commotion. Even the Dienling Yuanqing would be moved. If he refused in public, it would be like what Gawei said, a slap in the face to the Morning Star Academy. They might even think that he was here to make trouble because he was talented. If that happened, things would really get out of hand. Once things developed to that point, Lin Yi's only option was to change his mind and obediently follow them to the Eastern Continent's Morning Star Academy. Otherwise, he could imagine the consequences that awaited him even with his toes. However, Lin Yi still had many concerns in the North Island, and he really did not want to go to the East Continent now. Moreover, as mentioned before, with his current strength, even if he went to the Morning Star Academy, he would not be able to protect himself. Instead, it would bring unexpected trouble to Wang Xinyan. What should he do? Gawei stood aside for a while. Seeing that Lin Yi did not ask him any more questions, he said goodbye and left. While the academy guards were not watching him closely, he wanted to sell a few more exam clearance scripts to earn more spiritual jades. What's wrong? Huang Xiaotao suddenly pulled on Lin Yi's sleeve and asked worriedly. Gawei only felt that Lin Yi's expression was a little strange, but they were not familiar with each other. Based on the principle that it was better to avoid trouble, he would not meddle in Lin Yi's private affairs. But Huang Xiaotao was different. She was always paying attention to Lin Yi's expression. Moreover, with her close relationship with Lin Yi, she could clearly sense anything wrong with Lin Yi. Xiaotao, you heard what Gawei said just now, right? We're in trouble this time, and we might have to change our original intentions to pass. Lin Yi shrugged helplessly. Even if he had many trump cards, facing such a situation, he really didn't know what to do. Then what should we do? Huang Xiaotao was panicking. She didn't mind going to Dongzhou in the first place, and in fact, she did want to go there. However, there was a prerequisite for that, and that was to be with Lin Yi. If Lin Yi didn't want to go to the East Continent, then she didn't want to go either. If Lin Yi was forced to go, then she would follow him. And because of Lin Yi, she wouldn't feel happy. What worried Huang Xiaotao the most was that both she and Lin Yi would participate in the selection. It would be fine if both of them were chosen. But what if one of them was chosen, but the other wasn't? What would they do then? This situation wasn't impossible, it was extremely possible. Huang Xiaotao didn't know that Lin Yi had the 7 elements. But with all the miraculous things he had done in the past, she firmly believed that Lin Yi was a rare genius, and that it was normal for him to pass the Morning Star Academy selection. But Huang Xiaotao herself wasn't so sure. All along, there had been people praising her for her outstanding talent, but it depended on who she was compared to. She was indeed good when compared to ordinary people, but when compared to a freak like Lin Yi, it was far from enough. With her qualifications, it was hard to say whether she would be able to catch the eye of the big shots in the Morning Star Academy. It would be normal for her to be eliminated. At the thought of being separated from Lin Yi, Huang Xiaotao couldn't help but panic. Huang Xiaotao couldn't help but panic as she hugged Lin Yi's arm tightly. She was afraid that if she let go, Lin Yi would run away. Lin Yi hugged Huang Xiaotao gently. After a moment of silence, he slowly said, "Don't worry, it's not a big deal to think it through. When you go up later, just follow the normal procedure. Don't try to hide it or resist it. If you can be chosen, then it's a good thing and I'll be happy for you. If you don't get chosen, then it doesn't matter. Really? Huang Xiaotao blinked her eyes. She was still worried. She was afraid of being separated from Lin Yi. If they were to be separated from each other, she really didn't know what to do. Yes, I'm here. It'll be fine. Lin Yi smiled and nodded. He took a deep breath and said, "Oh." Huang Xiaotao was relieved. Lin Yi's ability couldn't be judged by common sense. Since he said it would be fine, then it definitely wouldn't be a problem. She didn't know that when Lin Yi faced other dangerous situations, he could rely on all kinds of trump cards to deal with it easily. But in this situation, he really didn't have any confidence. The reason why he said that was just to comfort Huang Xiaotao. After thinking about it, the only thing he could do now was to brace himself and go up. The only thing Lin Yi could rely on now was the cheat that hid his strength. After a while, he would purposely suppress his strength, and at the same time try to suppress his spiritual root to one type. That way, he probably wouldn't be selected by the Morning Star Academy. However, as for whether his cheat would be able to successfully deceive the stone tablet that was specially used to test spiritual roots, Lin Yi didn't have any confidence in his heart. If he succeeded, it would be great, but if he failed, then there really wasn't any other way. Of course, this method was really a choice made under desperation. When there was no other method to rely on, Lin Yi could only bet on this. Whether or not he could succeed, it all depended on the will of the heavens. In this situation, besides being forced to participate in the selection, Lin Yi also had to face an additional problem, which was that Huang Xiaotao's test plate was behind his. What was even more troublesome was that the seats that Lin Yi and Huang Xiaotao were sitting in were not very far back. Furthermore, when the Morning Star Academy arranged the selection order, it wasn't simply based on first come, first served. Instead, it was randomly arranged after the area was divided. This way, as much as possible, it could prevent people from deliberately squeezing forward in order to cut the line and cause a disturbance. Coincidentally, the next area that was drawn was the area that Lin Yi and Huang Xiaotao were in. Because they had to queue up in advance, a few Academy staff members who were in charge of the selection order were already standing not far from the two of them. They raised their hands and signaled for Lin Yi to follow the line in front of them. This meant that even if Lin Yi wanted to exchange test plates with Huang Xiaotao, it would be an extravagant dream. After all, this was a selection of close to 10,000 people. The Morning Star Academy was extremely strict with the order of the scene. Even giving up halfway was not allowed, and cutting the line was even more ridiculous. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, there were at least 5 or 6 Academy staff members who were constantly paying attention to the situation in the line. If Lin Yi were to rashly exchange with Huang Xiaotao, when the time came, there was no telling what kind of disturbance it would cause. To be continued. Chapter 43:16. Lin Yi couldn't help but groan inwardly. If he had known earlier, he would have acted more quickly and exchanged test cards with Huang Xiaotao before he queued up. In that case, whether Huang Xiaotao was chosen or not, Lin Yi could make corresponding countermeasures. If Huang Xiaotao was chosen, coupled with Wang Xinyan, Lin Yi could only grit his teeth and go to the East Continent. But now, Lin Yi had purposely hidden the attribute of his spirit root. What if he successfully tricked him and didn't pass, and Huang Xiaotao was chosen instead? What would he do then? But what if Lin Yi didn't hide his spirit root's attribute and was chosen by Morning Star Academy, but Huang Xiaotao wasn't chosen? Wouldn't that be even worse? If Lin Yi was left alone with his ability, he was not afraid of not being able to return to the North Island. But Huang Xiaotao could not. She was a woman, and it would be easy for her to get into trouble alone. Moreover, the strength of the early gold core stage was not very strong. How could she go back alone? He had to choose the lesser of two evils. So, for the sake of safety, he decided to hide the attribute of his spirit root first. No matter what, he had to make sure that he could stay. The worst-case scenario was that Huang Xiaotao would be chosen. It wouldn't be too bad. Although he was arranged into the long queue early, there were actually many people in front of Lin Yi. This wait lasted for a whole hour, And finally, after a long and torturous wait, it was Lin Yi's turn to take the test. Go over. The academy staff glanced at Lin Yi and motioned him to walk to the stone tablet, ready to test the spiritual root attribute. Lin Yi nodded slightly. Although he was a little nervous, he did not show it on his face. Not only did he not have the slightest intention of retreating. At first glance, he looked a little eager to try, almost the same as the other participants who were looking forward to joining the Morning Star Academy. The situation in front of him, Lin Yi knew that the more he flinched, the more suspicious he would be. This was especially so for the Academy bigwigs on the stage. They were definitely perceptive people. If they gave themselves away even the slightest bit, they might be done for. Moreover, before deceiving others, one must first be able to deceive oneself. The more skilled one was, the more confident one would be in deceiving others without leaving any traces. This was a compulsory course for Lin Yi before he made his debut. Lin Yi secretly glanced at the big shots of the academy on the stage, especially when he looked at the 3 mountain opening stage giants sitting in the middle. His current strength was far from theirs, although it might be too exaggerated to say that he was killed in a second by someone's gaze. He was only at the beginning stage of the gold elixir realm after all. Not to mention fighting against these people. Even if the other party just casually raised his hand, it would already be considered a favor to him. As for the outcome, of course, there was only one, which was to be killed in a second by these giants at the mountain opening stage. Facing this cruel reality, anyone would feel helpless, but Lin Yi could only choose to accept it and bury the grievance in his heart. He used it to constantly stimulate himself and become stronger. And at the same time when Lin Yi looked at the 3 mountain opening stage giants, his eyes uncontrollably met with Wang Xinyan, who sat beside the divine Nun of the East Sea. Lin. Wang Xinyan suddenly cried out involuntarily. Then she realized her current position and hurriedly covered her mouth. Her eyes were filled with disbelief and unconcealable ecstasy. Her position had an extremely wide field of vision. However, before this, Lin Yi was sitting in the crowd below. Even if she knew beforehand, it would be very difficult for her to notice it. Moreover, she did not know at all. But now, Lin Yi stood out to test it. This allowed her to see it clearly. Compared to the joy that Lin Yi felt when he first saw her, the ecstasy in Wang Xinyan's heart at this moment was far greater than Lin Yi's. This goddess, who was publicly acknowledged as the 3rd fairy of the Highland Sea, would never lose her composure in front of others. But at this moment, she really could not control herself. Although Lin Yi had always been concerned about Wang Xinyan, there was more than one woman that he needed to be concerned about. But Wang Xinyan was different. In this more than a year, Lin Yi's figure would appear in front of her almost every day, but it was all in her dreams. In the past more than a year, she thought about Lin Yi every day. She thought about where Lin Yi had gone to, whether he was living well, and whether he had suffered any grievances. More than once, Wang Xinyan had even impulsively wanted to leave the Morning Star Academy. She did not mind traversing the 5 heavenly islands just to find Lin Yi. However, her master, the divine Nun of the Eastern Sea, stopped her every time. Without strength, it was impossible to move an inch on the heavenly islands, let alone search for someone. That was what the divine Nun of the Eastern Sea had told her. As a result, Wang Xinyan began to work hard on her cultivation. She originally did not have any obsession with strength, but in the past year, she became more diligent than anyone else. The sponge body was like a sponge that absorbed water. It was an excellent body that could increase strength quickly. Combined with the divine Nun of the Eastern Sea's one-on-one guidance and cultivation resources, as well as Wang Xinyan's relentless cultivation, she was able to rise from the great perfection of the heavenly realm to early nascent soul in just a short year. As she created a legend in the world of cultivation, it also proved Wang Xinyan's devotion to Lin Yi. If she had not missed him so much, she would not have become who she was today. Yenner, what's wrong? The divine nun of the Eastern Sea suddenly turned around and asked, although Wang Xinyan was trying to hide it, and people who did not know her well might not be able to tell. She could not fool her master whom she saw every day. After all, Wang Xinyan's current unease was very different from how she usually behaved. And nothing. Wang Xinyan shook her head in a hurry. She came up with an excuse in a flash of inspiration. I think when I was cultivating earlier, my true qi went awry. I feel slightly uncomfortable. Really? The divine nun of the Eastern Sea did not doubt her at all. She knew about the sponge body. While cultivation progressed extremely quickly, it was indeed easy for problems to occur if one was not careful. She immediately placed her hand on Wang Xinyan's pulse and began to examine her closely without any hesitation. A while later, the divine nun of the Eastern Sea seemed to be rather doubtful, but she still let out a sigh of relief and comforted. It's all right. There are no signs of damage to your meridians. It should be fine. Yen, you just need to rest for a while. Why don't you return to the inn first? There's nothing for you to do here anyway. Thank you, master, but I'd better stay here. After all, this is a major matter for our academy. It's not good for me to be absent alone. It's not like there's anything wrong with me anyway. I'll just rest here. Wang Xinyan shook her head in a hurry. She had finally met Lin Yi after so much difficulty, so how could she leave now? To be continued. Chapter 40, 317. All right then. If you're still not feeling well, let me know as soon as possible. It's just a formality. It's fine as long as I'm here. It's fine if you want to go back. The divine nun of the Eastern Sea nodded and didn't say anything else. Okay. Wang Xinyan let out a sigh of relief. She was glad that her master had always doted on her and never suspected anything. Otherwise, she would have been exposed just now. Although she had a good relationship with the divine nun of the Eastern Sea, and Wang Xinyan wouldn't intentionally hide anything from her, it was still a public event. If her relationship with Lin Yi was exposed, it wouldn't be a good thing for both Lin Yi and herself. Wang Xinyan was very clear about this. After dealing with it, Wang Xinyan sneaked a glance at Lin Yi. Seeing Lin Yi nod at her without batting an eyelid, she immediately understood what Lin Yi was thinking. The corner of her mouth curled into a beautiful arc, and she smiled faintly. After giving Wang Xinyan a meaningful glance, Lin Yi didn't continue to look at her. Just like the other participants, he started to test for his spiritual roots. It was just like what Gawei had said. It didn't matter who it was. As long as they had a relationship with a goddess like Wang Xinyan, they wouldn't be envied or hated by anyone, even if it was just a simple conversation. On the contrary, in the eyes of the geniuses, this kind of person was an existence that had to be killed. His ending would definitely be worse than death. Putting aside his joy and other distracting thoughts, Lin Yi placed his palm on the stone tablet like everyone else, and at the same time activated his mental cultivation method. This stone tablet used to test the spiritual root was specially brought out from the East Sea by the Morning Star Academy. Not only was it very professional, but it was also very sensitive. The formation set up inside was very complicated and exquisite. Anyone could immediately analyze the corresponding spiritual roots. Even the hidden and pseudo-spiritual roots, which were extremely difficult to detect with normal methods, couldn't escape the detection of the formation. No matter how weak his attributes were, he would never miss a single point. Just like the other participants, the results would show as soon as they put their hands on the stone. But when it came to Lin Yi, it took several breaths of time, and the stone didn't show any reaction at all. It gave people the feeling that something was wrong. It was as if this guy did not have any spiritual root attribute at all. Hey, are you injecting your true qi or not? The staff member at the side was immediately puzzled when he saw the scene. He was in charge of this work and had tested thousands of people, if not tens of thousands. He had never seen someone like Lin Yi who had no reaction at all. Yes, Senior, you should also feel the true energy fluctuations on my body. Lin Yi said with a helpless expression. How did this happen? The staff member was speechless. He had indeed felt the true energy fluctuations from Lin Yi's body, but the stone tablet didn't react at all. Could it be that there was a problem with the detection array inside? That didn't seem possible, right? However, if the guy in front of him really didn't have a spirit root attribute, that was even more impossible. No matter what, he was an expert in the early stage of the gold core realm. If he did not have an outstanding spiritual root attribute, he would not even be able to cultivate, let alone become an expert in the gold core realm. The staff members of the academy looked at each other in dismay. At this moment, Lin Yi pretended to be helpless on the surface, but he was actually very confident in his heart. The reason why he was like this was actually because of his golden finger. To put it plainly, this situation was actually Lin Yi doing an experiment, and the first thing he needed to confirm was that could his golden finger deceive the intricate detection stone tablet with its internal formation? Judging from the current situation, the gold finger was indeed effective. What he had to do next was to carefully control the gold finger and release one of the attributes of the spiritual root that it had hidden. This step was much more difficult than directly concealing everything, because if he was not careful, he might be completely exposed. Therefore, Lin Yi needed to do an experiment, and he needed to warm up his hands in advance. Only when he was confident in his heart could he do it without any loopholes. The surrounding staff members of the academy did not know the knack of this, and they were all at a loss. If they had no other choice, they were even prepared to use the backup spiritual root attribute testing tool. However, the accuracy was far less than the stone tablet, and the people who participated in the test were very likely to have deviations. However, at this moment, a fiery red color suddenly appeared on the stone tablet, which was the sign of the fire spiritual root attribute. Success! Lin Yi suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. The gold finger was indeed useful. It could even deceive such an extremely intricate detection stone tablet. It was really powerful and against the natural order. Fortunately, it doesn't seem to be a big problem. The staff members of the academy immediately breathed a sigh of relief. In their opinion, this should be because there were too many people in the detection stone tablet, so it was inevitable that there would be a small problem, and the reaction was just a little slower. They did not even think that it was Lin Yi who had done something. The detection formation in the detection stone tablet was almost as complicated as a teleportation formation. Even a formation grandmaster who was extremely proficient in this field would have to study it for a long time before they could figure out the knack. If it was said that Lin Yi, an expert in the early golden elixir realm who participated in the selection, could do something under their noses, no one would believe it, even if they were beaten to death. Fire's spiritual root attribute, it seems that there is only one. Do you want to try again? The staff member of the academy paused and said, if it was someone else, he would have announced that they were directly eliminated. However, this time there seemed to be some problems with the detection stone tablet. He also felt that the results might be biased, so he planned to give Lin Yi a chance to retest. Forget it. There was only one type of spiritual root that was tested previously. I'd better give up. Lin Yi shook his head and sighed in disappointment. All right, since you have no problems, it will save everyone's time. You can go now. The staff member of the academy nodded. A single spiritual root attribute was the most common. Even if the detection stone tablet's reaction was a little slow, since it could detect the result, it would not be wrong. Moreover, the strength of Lin Yi was only in the early golden elixir realm. He had barely reached the threshold. They were also too lazy to waste more time on such a candidate who had no future at first glance. Lin Yi nodded to the staff member of the academy. Then he walked out of the field in a daze with a bleak expression. In the eyes of others, he was a pitiful person who had failed the selection. Little did they know that in his heart at this moment, he was actually very happy. To be continued. Chapter 40, 318. Suppressing his spiritual root to only the fire element, and at the same time his own strength was also suppressed by Lin Yi, becoming the weakest early golden core stage. It was no wonder that the staff looked down on him. No matter who saw Lin Yi now, they wouldn't think that this person had anything to do with the Morning Star Academy, where all the geniuses gathered. From the beginning to the end, Wang Xinyan, who was on the stage, had clearly seen the entire process of Lin Yi's test. At this moment, when she saw Lin Yi leave the stage dejectedly, she was instantly shocked, speechless. She had thought that since Lin Yi came to participate in the selection, it must be for the sake of entering the Morning Star Academy. From then on, the two of them could be together. She had even been looking forward to the beautiful life in the academy, but she didn't expect that Lin Yi actually didn't pass. This situation was really unbelievable to Wang Xinyan. Others might not understand Lin Yi, but she knew everything about Lin Yi clearly. She clearly remembered that Lin Yi had a heaven-defying aptitude of the 5 elements and 7 elements. How did he suddenly become a single fire element spiritual root? Could it be that there was really a problem with the stone tablet? But if that was the case, Lin Yi wouldn't have said the last sentence. Since he said that, then he must have made plans in advance. He wanted to give up the selection without leaving a trace. That must be it. Although Wang Xinyan didn't know the specific reason why Lin Yi did this, she believed that since Lin Yi did this, then he must have his reasons. So even though she was shocked, she didn't show anything strange. After Lin Yi, Huang Xiaotao followed closely behind. The two met at the entrance, and Huang Xiaotao looked at Lin Yi nervously. Although she didn't know as much as Wang Xinyan, she also felt that the scene just now was very strange. Lin Yi actually had a single fire element spiritual root, and Lin Yi actually failed. Was this possible? However, with so many academy staff watching them, Huang Xiaotao didn't dare to voice her doubts at this time, no matter how many doubts she had. She could only use her eyes to ask Lin Yi. From the beginning until now, Lin Yi had not told her his specific plans. He only told her to perform as usual and not to worry about anything else. But now, Lin Yi was definitely eliminated, and she still did not know what the outcome would be. If he didn't get chosen like Lin Yi, then he would be in trouble. Although it was a little disappointing, it was a good thing for Huang Xiaotao because she could continue to be with Lin Yi that way. But what if she was chosen? According to Gawei, she couldn't even refuse if she was chosen. Could it be that he would be separated from Lin Yi and go to the Eastern continent alone to study at the Morning Star Academy? Be yourself. Don't worry. Lin Yi suddenly walked up and patted Huang Xiaotao's hand with a warm smile. Yes, Huang Xiaotao nodded, knowing that she couldn't let her imagination run wild at this time. After taking a deep breath, she walked towards the stone tablet under Lin Yi's gaze. Who was she? On the stage. Wang Xinyan couldn't help but stare blankly at this scene. She felt a little jealous in her heart. Could it be that this was Lin Yi's new confidant? At the very least, she was sure that this girl was a native of Heaven Island. After all, the temperament of people from the common world and people from Heaven Island was completely different. Heaven Island had an ancient charm through and through, while people from the common world, no matter how well they blended in, still carried the aura of modern society. This was something that couldn't be erased even if one wanted to. She unexpectedly saw the lover that she had been longing for, only to find that he had a confidant by his side. Although it was inevitable that her feelings were a little complicated, Wang Xinyan wasn't a jealous person. After thinking about it, she felt relieved. Lin Yi was so outstanding that it was normal for other women to fall in love with him. Moreover, she was used to sharing with the girls in the common world. Now, even if there was one more, she wouldn't find it hard to accept. The only thing that Wang Xinyan was really concerned about was how to avoid the eyes of outsiders and meet Lin Yi in private. At this moment, under Lin Yi's gaze, Huang Xiaotao slowly walked to the front of the testing stone tablet. After exhaling a mouthful of impure air, she placed her hand on the stone tablet, circulated the mental cultivation method, and inserted her true chi. The stone tablet reacted very quickly. It was the same as when Lin Yi was tested. A fiery red color appeared on the stone tablet. At first glance, it seemed to be a single attribute, fire spirit root. However, if one looked closely, they would discover that Huang Xiaotao's fiery red color was fundamentally different from Lin Yi's. This was because her fiery red color was like a flame that was placed in the air, constantly swaying back and forth. Could this be? The academy staff couldn't help but look at each other in disbelief. At this moment, there was no need for them to announce it. When the elders on the stage saw this scene, their eyes suddenly lit up. Even the dean, Ling Yuanqing, and the vice dean, Wei Hebei, stood up at the same time. Although they had already recruited 2 people, whether it was Chu Muqing's tri-elemental spiritual root or Hedgehog Head's quadruple elemental spiritual root, it did not make the 2 mountain opening stage powerhouses show any expression of surprise. Even if Wei Hebei finally accepted Hedgehog Head, it was only after a moment of hesitation that he finally made the decision. Moreover, he was just an insignificant in-name disciple. However, when they saw Huang Xiaotao's spirit root attribute, even these 2 mountain opening stage powerhouses couldn't sit still. Fire and wind dual spirit root attribute. The academy staff was stunned for a long time before he couldn't conceal his pleasant surprise and shouted. Before he could finish his sentence, the entire audience was in an uproar. Even Chu Muqing and Hedgehog Head, who had already been accepted, had faces full of shock. Wind was a standard, mutated spirit root attribute. This was already extremely rare, not to mention that Huang Xiaotao also had a fire spirit root attribute. This kind of aptitude could already be considered a genius among geniuses. Are you willing to join the Morning Star Academy and become my personal disciple? Ling Yuanqing and Wei Hebei seemed to have spoken at the same time. After they finished speaking, they could not help but look at each other and smile bitterly. The 2 mountain opening stage powerhouses had actually taken a liking to Huang Xiaotao at the same time. It couldn't be helped. People with such aptitude were really too rare. If they missed out on Huang Xiaotao, they might not be able to find another genius with both fire and wind spirit roots in their lifetime. If Huang Xiaotao only had a mutated spirit root attribute, even if she had another 5 elements spirit root attribute, with Ling Yuanqing and Wei Hebei's cultivation and knowledge, they wouldn't have lost their composure like this. The key point was that her 2 spirit roots were not other, but fire and wind. Today, a reader in Urine 22 told the fishman that if Lin Yi didn't want to participate, he could just leave. If you read the book carefully, you can see that this is not realistic. If Lin Yi didn't want to participate, the staff would already be nearby. He wouldn't even have the time to change his badge, so how could he run? Furthermore, this place is already under martial law, so he can't run out. Do you want to tell them that he didn't receive his badge? Isn't that the same as seeking death? Apart from Guyu and a few others who didn't receive their badge, everyone else received theirs. There were only a few people who didn't receive their badge. The person who issued the badge definitely had an impression of them, and Lin Yi wasn't among them. Even if Lin Yi lost or hid his badge and insisted that he didn't receive it, would he fight to the end? Would the academy believe their own people, or would they believe Lin Yi? With the overbearing nature of the academy's tycoons, why would they listen to Lin Yi's explanation? Wouldn't they just directly make a move? Recently, a reader told the fishman that there was no need to write too much detail in the chapter, and that the places to explain should be minimized. Therefore, the fishman left out the parts that could be explained or not. However, it was difficult to satisfy everyone. Some readers felt that the explanation was unnecessary, while others felt that it was necessary. The fishman could only try his best to satisfy everyone and explain at the end of the chapter. The explanation doesn't take up a lot of words in the main text. Do you want to know more exciting developments in School Bell's Bodyguard? Open up WeChat now. Click on the plus sign on the top right. Select the Add Friends public account, search for Zhongwen Wang, and follow the public account. You won't miss any more updates. Floating Astronomy. Chapter 40, 319. The wind increased the power of the fire, and the fire assisted the might of the wind. The two of them were existences that could complement each other. Once they encountered the guidance of a great master, their power would be completely unlocked. The effects would not be as simple as 1 + 1. It was not something that regular mutated spiritual roots could compare to. Other people could not see the powerful prospects behind it. But how could Ling Yuanqing and Wei Hebei, who are major figures of the mountain establishment stage, not even be able to see this? More importantly, during Huang Xiaotao's test just now, that tiny bit of qi fluctuation couldn't escape the senses of these mountain opening stage powerhouses. Moreover, she wasn't like Lin Yi, who could use his golden finger to hide his strength. Ling Yuanqing and Wei Hebei had clearly sensed that this person was actually a golden core stage expert with a perfect breakthrough. Fire and wind spiritual roots were already extremely rare and powerful talents. But Huang Xiaotao was actually a 1 in a million perfect gold core stage experts. With such a heaven-defying potential, no matter who saw it, they would be dumbfounded. Even the giants of the mountain opening stage, like Ling Yuanqing, were no exception. Once they took Huang Xiaotao under their wing, then with their knowledge and resources, it would be sufficient for them to create an extraordinary expert that was a pillar of the academy in the future. It was even to the extent that it wasn't impossible for Huang Xiaotao to be on equal footing with them one day. It would be strange if Ling Yuanqing and Wei Hebei did not lose their composure in the face of such a great temptation. In reality, although the other major figure of the mountain establishment stage, the divine nun of the Eastern Sea, did not stand up like the two of them, her gaze towards Huang Xiaotao was also filled with splendor. I've been chosen. Huang Xiaotao was not as happy as everyone imagined her to be. Faced with the olive branch thrown out by the two major figures of the mountain establishment stage, she was rather at a loss. All she could do was turn around and look at Lin Yi, who had yet to leave. Everyone present could not help but feel speechless when they saw this. The hedgehog head had only been accepted by Wei Hebei as an insignificant disciple in name, yet he was already so cocky that he could not hold back his pride. In the end, this person was even better. Two major figures of the mountain establishment stage had both promised her the position of a direct disciple, yet she still did not hurry up and agree. They really did not know what to say. At this moment, not only was everyone shocked, even Lin Yi couldn't react to Huang Xiaotao's pleading gaze. He really didn't expect Huang Xiaotao to have a wind attribute spiritual root. It was no wonder that Huang Xiaotao was so good at speed. It was also no wonder that her archery was so strong. Her archery had reached a truly profound level. In fact, it was all about the control of the wind. With Huang Xiaotao's talent, it was natural for her to control the wind like an extension of her arm. All along, especially after she had met Lin Yi, Huang Xiaotao hadn't displayed any powerful abilities. Part of it was because she was overshadowed by Lin Yi's various halos. More importantly, even Huang Xiaotao herself didn't know that she had such a powerful innate talent. They didn't even have the most basic knowledge. There was no need to talk about development. Huang Xiaotao relied entirely on her instincts. She went from the cultivator tribe to the 3 pavilions of the North Island step by step. Even the archery that she was most proficient in was only because she often moved about in the dense forest. It was purely a coincidence, and not because she knew that he had a wind attribute, spiritual root. That was why he specially went to cultivate. If Huang Xiaotao's innate talent was said to be 100, then up until now, she had at most developed 30. She wasn't even 30 yet. One day, when she developed 100% of her innate talent, what kind of scene would that be? Even if Lin Yi imagined this, he couldn't help but feel a little shocked. It was true that in terms of innate talent, Huang Xiaotao couldn't compare to him, who had the 5 elements and 7 attributes. However, if he really cultivated her, she might not be any worse than Wang Xinyan, who had a spongy constitution. And Wang Xinyan was now an existence that was regarded as a treasure by the entire Morning Star Academy. Thinking of this, even Lin Yi couldn't help but feel a little overwhelmed. Huang Xiaotao was already on his side. Since she was on his side, naturally the stronger she was the better. Huang Xiaotao looked at Lin Yi from afar, waiting for Lin Yi to give her an answer. However, everyone present, especially Ling Yuanqing and Wei Hebei, who were eager to take this genius under their wing, couldn't wait that long. That's right. From now on, you are a disciple of the Morning Star Academy. Furthermore, you are our direct disciple. Whether it's status or treatment, you are guaranteed to be of the highest level in the academy. However, as for who you want to take as your master, it's still up to you to decide, Ling Yuanqing said in an experienced and prudent manner. He was the same as the divine nun of the Eastern Sea. Normally, he didn't take in disciples, especially direct disciples. He had very few disciples under him. If Huang Xiaotao agreed, then after entering the academy, her status would definitely not be lower than Wang Xinyan's. However, Ling Yuanqing was the dean after all. No matter how much he liked Huang Xiaotao's powerful innate talent, he still had to consider the feelings of others. Ordinary academy instructors naturally didn't have the qualifications to fight with him for a disciple, but there was still Wei Hebei, who was also a pillar of the Morning Star Academy. Ling Yuanqing couldn't act arbitrarily. If you respect me, I'll respect you 10 times. With Ling Yuanqing's stance, Wei Hebei, who was beside him, also nodded his head repeatedly without any objections. But don't we still have to go through the 3rd test? Huang Xiaotao said weakly, There's no need. With your innate talent, any other test would be unnecessary. Ling Yuanqing and Wei Hebei, the 2 mountain opening stage powerhouses, shook their heads at the same time. She had dual fire and wind spiritual roots, as well as a perfect gold core stage expert that was 1 in 10,000. With this kind of innate talent, as long as she was nurtured a little, it was absolutely impossible for an expert of the same level to be a match for Huang Xiaotao. She was already destined to have limitless potential, so the so-called potential test in the 3rd test was naturally unnecessary. Then I have to discuss it with my senior brother. With the sudden development of the situation, Huang Xiaotao suddenly didn't know what to do. She could only look at Lin Yi, who was at the side, for help. Sure, go ahead. After discussing it with your senior brother, you can directly come up to the stage. Ling Yuanqing didn't make things difficult for her and immediately nodded his head in agreement. If it was someone else, they wouldn't have given them any chance to choose. After discussing it with each other, they would directly make a decision. Why would they bother to ask the person's opinion? However, Huang Xiaotao was different. As the saying goes, strength determines status. In a place like the academy, especially in this kind of situation, potential could also determine status. They could ignore the thoughts of an ordinary disciple. But Huang Xiaotao was a super genius disciple who might be on equal footing with them in the future. How could they treat her like an ordinary disciple? As long as Huang Xiaotao didn't explicitly say that she wasn't willing to join, everything else could be accommodated. Under the gazes of tens of thousands of people, Huang Xiaotao ran out of the stage in fear and trepidation. She ran to the front of Lin Yi and anxiously looked at Lin Yi, saying, "What should I do now?" Want to know more exciting developments in School Bell's personal expert? Open up WeChat now. Click on the plus sign at the top right. Select the Add Friends public account. Search for Zhongwen Wang. Follow the public account and never miss an update. Floating Astronomy. Chapter 40, 320. Xiaotao, you don't have to panic. To be chosen by these mountain opening stage giants and become their personal disciple, This is an exceptional opportunity that others can only dream of. Therefore, this is a once-in-a-blue-moon opportunity. You should be happy." Lin Yi smiled and did not seem to be in a difficult position. But if I agree to them, won't I have to separate from you?" Huang Xiaotao miserably grabbed onto Lin Yi's hand. In her eyes, the opportunity that others yearned for was far less important than being together with Lin Yi. If she could reject them, she would have just braced herself and directly rejected them. Unfortunately, this was impossible, not to mention the terrifying consequences that would result if she rejected them in public. Even Lin Yi would not agree to it. To be honest, if it was just entering Morning Star Academy to study, or becoming a disciple of a normal academy teacher, Lin Yi indeed didn't think much of it. This was because he was confident that even if Huang Xiaotao were to follow him, her growth wouldn't be any lower than his, and might even surpass his. However, it was different now. The people who wanted to accept Huang Xiaotao were mountain opening stage giants like Ling Yuanqing and Wei Hebei. Moreover, they were giving her the important status of personal disciple. This kind of condition was truly rare. Even if it was Lin Yi himself, he would be tempted, let alone Huang Xiaotao. With such an opportunity and Huang Xiaotao's powerful aptitude, it was extremely likely that she would become the next Wang Xinyan. How could Lin Yi stop her? It's fine. The separation now is for the sake of reuniting in the future. Xiaotao, after you go there, don't think too much about other things. Just focus on cultivating. Don't worry, I will come and find you, but not now. Lin Yi solemnly instructed. Oh, Huang Xiaotao had always been obedient to Lin Yi. Since Lin Yi had said so, even if she was reluctant, she would not go against Lin Yi's wishes. However, he would not go against Lin Yi's wishes. Still, he was a little worried. But if I leave just like this, won't you be alone? The environment here is so chaotic. Just as Lin Yi was worried about leaving Huang Xiaotao behind, Huang Xiaotao also had the same worry. When she was with Lin Yi, they could use the Frenzy 8 trigrams palm strike. Even if they were to face a nascent soul stage expert, they wouldn't feel the slightest bit guilty. However, if she left with the people from the Morning Star Academy and left Lin Yi alone, even if his strength was much stronger than that of an ordinary early-stage Golden Elixir Realm expert, it was still not enough to deal with this dangerous Jianghu. Don't worry, Xiaotao. Don't you believe in my strength? As long as I'm careful, protecting myself won't be a problem. Lin Yi smiled as he shook his head. After a pause, he changed the topic and said, "But little Tao, you have to be careful when you get to the Morning Star Academy. You heard what Gu Yi said just now. It's a dragon's pool and a tiger's den. It's even more dangerous than the outside world. Little Tao, after you get there, try your best to stay out of it. You just need to cultivate in peace. Try your best not to get involved in the grudges and disputes of outsiders. And I'll listen to you." Huang Xiaotao obediently nodded her head. She then asked, "Then who should I choose to be my master?" "Compared to Wei Hebei, I feel that the dean, Ling Yuanqing, is better. Let's not talk about his strength, but he is the dean. His status is higher than Wei Hebei, who is the vice dean. If you can become his personal disciple, others shouldn't dare to provoke you. It'll be safer." Lin Yi analyzed. This was a judgment made after comparing the hard conditions. As for Ling Yuanqing and Wei Hebei, Lin Yi wasn't clear about their characters. Naturally, he couldn't make an evaluation. "Oh, then I understand." Huang Xiaotao nodded her head. She didn't have any opinions of her own, or it could be said that her opinions were based on what Lin Yi said. Since Lin Yi had said so, she would do as Lin Yi said. "Also, Xiaotao, after you go to the Morning Star Academy, try your best not to get involved in the grudges of outsiders. However, there's one person you can get close to," Lin Yi said after some thought. "Who? Could it be that you know someone in the Morning Star Academy?" Huang Xiaotao was flabbergasted. She remembered that Lin Yi was the same as her. He hadn't even heard of the Morning Star Academy before. Could it be that he knew someone? That's right. It's the female vice dean, the personal disciple of the divine nun of the East Ocean. She's also one of the 3 fairies of the High Lin Sea domain that Gowen mentioned, Huang Xinyan. Lin, he nodded his head. Ah. Huang Xiaotao couldn't help but look at Huang Xinyan, who was on the stage. She realized that Huang Xinyan was looking at the 2 of them with a thoughtful gaze. She hurriedly lowered her head, but her heart was in turmoil. Don't be surprised. She's the same as me. We came up from the common world together. She's my... Lin Yi's face reddened as he said this. He rubbed his nose and said, She's the same as you. We're all on the same side. As long as you reveal your identity to her, she'll definitely help you no matter what. Although it was a little boastful to say this, Lin Yi couldn't go to the Morning Star Academy himself. He could only arrange it this way. Fortunately, Huang Xinyan was also the gentle type. She had always been understanding. Lin Yi believed that because of him, she would definitely treat Huang Xiaotao well. Oh. Only then did Huang Xiaotao come to her senses. No wonder Lin Yi had lost his composure the moment he laid eyes on her. There was a layer of relationship between the 2 of them. She originally thought that after going to the Morning Star Academy, she would be alone with no one to rely on. She didn't think that the 3rd fairy, Huang Xinyan, was on the same side. Huang Xiaotao finally relaxed, but then she felt a little shy and worried. Huang Xinyan was Lin Yi's girlfriend. Moreover, the 2 of them already had that kind of relationship back in the common world. Then, as a latecomer, wouldn't it be like a concubine meeting a wife? Would the other party make things difficult for her? However, it was impossible for Huang Xiaotao to ask Lin Yi about this. She could only comfort herself silently. Previously, Shanghai Laner was also Lin Yi's girlfriend. She didn't have any bad feelings towards her, and instead, she was very easy to get along with. This 3rd fairy, Huang Xinyan, didn't seem to be a difficult person to get along with either. She probably wouldn't make things difficult for her. Huang Xinyan, who was on the stage, watched the entire discussion between Huang Xiaotao and Lin Yi. Previously, it was only a guess, but now she could conclude that the 2 of them must have a very deep relationship. This genius with dual fire and wind spiritual roots, if nothing unexpected happened, should be her new sister. Master, disciple has been cultivating alone for such a long time. It's really too lonely. Master, can you let this junior sister cultivate with me? The 2 of us can be companions. Huang Xinyan thought for a moment and pretended that nothing had happened. She immediately suggested to the divine nun of the Eastern Sea, If anyone has any questions, you can ask the Murlocs through Urine 22, or you can directly go to the official tribe to communicate with the Murlocs. The Murlocs often appear in the tribe. On your QQ, click on Status, Interest Tribe, and search for School Bell's personal expert to follow. This is the official communication platform. Everyone is welcome to interact. Want to know more about the exciting status of School Bell's personal expert? Open up WeChat now. Click on the plus sign at the top right. Select the Add Friends public account and search for Zhongwenwang. Follow the public account, and you won't miss any updates. Floating Astronomy. Chapter 40, 321. Since they were new sisters, and since they were on the same side, Huang Xinyan obviously could not just stand by and watch. Even if it was purely for the sake of Lin Yi, she had to take good care of Huang Xiaotao. The best way was to get Huang Xiaotao to become a disciple of the divine Nun of the East Sea as well. That way, the two of them would be fellow disciples, and they could face anything together. Moreover, the divine Nun of the East Sea only had one direct disciple. She would protect her no matter what. If Huang Xiaotao joined, she would probably not suffer any grievances. The divine Nun of the East Sea was already rather tempted, but she was too embarrassed to argue with them since Ling Yuanqing and Wei Hebei had already spoken up. However, she immediately made up her mind after hearing what Huang Xinyan had said. After all, this was a dual spiritual root of fire and wind, and she was a perfect golden core cultivator. Her talent was no less than Huang Xinyan's, and what made it even rarer was that she was a female cultivator. To the divine nun of the East Sea who did not have many disciples, she was a disciple delivered to her doorstep by the heavens. Even if she had to throw away her dignity, she would fight for it. Oh, of course. It's rare for you to think like that, How can I disappoint you? The divine nun of the East Sea had always doted on Huang Xinyan. After patting her hand, she immediately stood up and said to Ling Yuanqing and Wei Hebei, "You two men shouldn't fight with me over this disciple. There aren't a lot of female disciples in the first place, and there are even fewer with talent like her. Let her cultivate with me." About that, Ling Yuanqing and Wei Hebei looked at one another and could not help but feel rather embarrassed. The two of them were indeed rather tempted by Huang Xiaotao's great talent, and they had already made up their minds to take Huang Xiaotao in as a disciple. However, since the divine nun of the East Sea had spoken up, the two of them were rather embarrassed to keep fighting. No matter what, the divine nun of the East Sea was a woman after all. The two of them had to give in to her. Moreover, the divine nun of the East Sea had always only accepted female disciples. None of the male disciples with extraordinary talent she had encountered in the past had ever stepped forward to compete with her. As a matter of fact, even now, the vice principal of the academy, a mighty figure of the founding period, only had a single direct disciple, Huang Xinyan. Both of them should not compete with her, or they would seem far too petty. Among the 3 mountain opening stage powerhouses of the Morning Star Academy, putting aside the insignificant honorary disciples, just from the number of direct disciples. Although it had been a few years since Wei Hebei had accepted an apprentice, he was still the one with the most number of apprentices. It would be wrong of him to come out and fight for it at this time. As for Dean Ling Yuanqing, although he had very few direct disciples, he had more than the divine nun of the Eastern Sea's only child. Furthermore, not only was the divine nun of the Eastern Sea powerful, she was also one of the vice deans of the academy. To the Morning Star Academy, she was indispensable. Now that she had spoken, Ling Yuanqing really couldn't go against her wishes. "All right then, since Donghai has spoken, she will be under your tutelage. Moreover, among the 3 of us, you are indeed the most suitable person to teach her." Ling Yuanqing made the final decision. Wei Hebei, who was beside him, didn't have any objections. After a while, after Huang Xiaotao and Lin Yi finished their discussion, they followed Ling Yuanqing's instructions in front of everyone. She directly walked onto the platform and arrived before the 3 mountain opening stage powerhouses. However, before she could say anything, the divine nun of the Eastern Sea directly said to her, "Miss, the 2 of them are men. Neither of them are suitable to be your master. I've already discussed it with them earlier. In the future, you can become my direct disciple and cultivate with Yan Er. How about that?" Huh. Huang Xiaotao was taken aback. She could not help but turn to look at Lin Yi below the platform. Lin Yi had just told her to become the Dean Ling Yuanqing's disciple. Below the platform, Lin Yi saw this and hurriedly nodded at Huang Xiaotao. The reason why he had Huang Xiaotao choose Ling Yuanqing was because he felt he was better than Wei Hebei. However, since the divine nun of the Eastern Sea also wanted to take Huang Xiaotao as a disciple, the divine nun of the Eastern Sea was obviously the most suitable. That way, Huang Xiaotao would be able to advance and retreat together with Huang Xinyan as soon as she entered. Yes, disciple Huang Xiaotao greets master. After receiving Lin Yi's signal, Huang Xiaotao bowed to the divine nun of the Eastern Sea in a hurry. Apart from her reluctance to part with Lin Yi, she finally felt a sliver of joy and excitement. After all, she was becoming the direct disciple of a mountain opening powerhouse. No one could remain completely unperturbed. All right. Get up, disciple." The divine nun of the Eastern Sea hurriedly helped her up. Even with her cultivation, she struggled to hide her joy. Not only was she a genius with dual spiritual roots of fire and wind, but she was also a 1 in 1,000,000 perfect golden core cultivator. Most importantly, Huang Xiaotao's kindness made her feel like she was fated with her from the bottom of her heart. The higher one's cultivation, especially after reaching mountain opening, the clearer they would be able to see the insubstantial fate. The divine nun of the Eastern Sea had studied this very well. Taking a disciple depended on fate. Only when they were fated with each other would their fates be compatible and be happy. It was like that when she took in Wang Xinyan, and it was the same with Huang Xiaotao now. The divine nun of the Eastern Sea was warm and gentle. She held Huang Xiaotao's hand and pointed at Ling Yuanqing and Wei Hebei on the side. Come, from today onwards, the two of them are your senior uncles. Although the divine nun of the Eastern Sea did not share the same master as the two of them, they were both pillars of the Morning Star Academy now. They shared the same interests, so they could be regarded as fellow disciples. Disciple greets the two senior uncles. Huang Xiaotao immediately bowed to the two of them in understanding. There's no need to be so polite. Junior niece, please rise. Ling Yuanqing and Wei Hebei nodded with a smile, but they could not help but feel some pity inside. They could have been direct disciples, but they had become junior nieces instead. The feeling of missing out on a genius was like missing out on a lottery ticket in the secular world and winning a grand prize of 10 million. It was quite a pity. She's Wang Xinyan. She joined the academy a year earlier than you. She's your senior sister. The divine nun of the Eastern Sea introduced her to Huang Xiaotao. Xiaotao greets senior sister. This was the first time Huang Xiaotao had seen Wang Xinyan up close. Even as a woman, she could not help but be moved by her beauty and bearing. It was no wonder that she could become one of the 3 fairies of the Highland Sea region. It was also no wonder that she could be with Lin Yi in the secular world. Greetings, Junior Xiaotao. Wang Xinyan bowed before walking over and wrapping her arm around Huang Xiaotao's in a friendly manner. She turned around and asked the divine nun of the Eastern Sea, Master, I want to go out for some fresh air. I can take Junior Huang back to the inn to settle her in. All right, go. But it's best if you don't leave Jinduan City, just in case something happens. The divine nun of the Eastern Sea nodded in agreement. She really did dote on Wang Xinyan. No matter what her disciple said, she would basically agree to it. Her words were filled with heartwarming concern. Floating astronomy. Chapter 40, 322. Now that Jinduan City was completely under the control of the Morning Star Academy, it could be regarded as absolutely safe. Even in the surrounding sea regions, with so many peak experts of the Morning Star Academy present, no one would dare to do anything to them. However, beauty was a source of trouble. Wang Xinyan's beauty could still cause trouble. After all, the world never lacked blind idiots. Moreover, the divine nun of the East Sea could tell that although her new disciple, Huang Xiaotao, always wore a veil for some reason, she was an extremely rare beauty in terms of her figure and bearing. When she stood next to Wang Xinyan, they each had their own merits. If the two of them walked out together, the allure they would bring would not be something that regular men could resist. With the divine nun of the East Sea's permission, Wang Xinyan took Huang Xiaotao with her and bade farewell to her 2 senior uncles, Ling Yuanqing and Wei Hebei, before leaving in high spirits. What she wanted to do right now was obviously not to take Huang Xiaotao back to the inn. Instead, she was in a hurry to meet up with Lin Yi in private. With the tacit understanding between Lin Yi and Wang Xinyan, he obviously knew what she wanted to do. With a smile, he immediately left the square. There was no point in him staying here anyway, and he had already completed the test. No one would stop him from leaving. However, after leaving the square, Lin Yi had no idea where he should go. Wang Xinyan and Huang Xiaotao were too big of a target. It was impossible for him to stay here and wait for him. However, as soon as he turned around, Lin Yi was immediately overjoyed. To his surprise, a new notice had been pasted on the notice board nearby. The ink had not even dried yet, so a group of people had gathered around to watch. Most of them were like Lin Yi, people who had come to participate in the selection but ended up being eliminated. They all pointed at the notice and discussed it. Can anyone tell me what's written there? I've studied for a few years after all, so why can't I recognize a single word? Someone said in confusion. The people in the surroundings were all confused as well. They had no idea what was going on. Let me take a look. A voice that Lin Yi was familiar with suddenly rang out. It was Gu Wei, the South Continent's Guwensi. No one knew when this guy had snuck out, but after looking at it for a long time, he was as dumbfounded as everyone else. Damn, what kind of words are these? Why are they as crooked as tadpoles? It's not like it's vertical. Could it be that some bored guy wrote it to fool people? The onlookers nodded. Only Lin Yi, who was at the back, didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was written in English. It would be strange if these people could understand it. Haha, it's been a year since we last met, and this girl's gotten smarter. Lin Yi smiled faintly. This had to be Wang Xinyan's doing. No one could read English in this kind of place, so even if she posted it openly, she didn't have to worry about being seen through. Moreover, the location was eye-catching. It was killing two birds with one stone. Go straight ahead, turn left at the third alley, and there will be a tea house. See you there. Lin Yi silently memorized these words. He couldn't suppress the excitement in his heart, and quickly followed the directions. Very quickly he arrived at the third alley. The tea house was called Swallow Water Tea House. Compared to the hustle and bustle outside, there weren't many people in the tea house. At this time, those who rushed to Jinduan City were all here for the Morning Star Academy selection. At this time, they were all gathered at Jinduan Square. Young hero, this way please. Would you like a table downstairs or a private room upstairs? Immediately, a tea house worker came forward and eagerly led the way for Lin Yi. Lin Yi looked left and right. He didn't see Wang Xinyan and Huang Xiaotao in the hall downstairs, so he said to the tea house worker, I'm looking for someone. They should have arrived first. Oh, I understand. Please follow me. The tea house worker seemed to have been specially instructed. He immediately nodded and brought Lin Yi to a private room upstairs. After the worker left, Lin Yi pushed open the door and entered. The silhouettes of two girls came into view. It was Wang Xinyan and Huang Xiaodao. Closing the door behind him, Lin Yi and Wang Xinyan looked at each other silently. Neither of them said anything. It was as if time had stopped at this moment. After a long time, Lin Yi and Wang Xinyan walked towards each other at the same time. Lin Yi's lips curled into a beautiful smile. He opened his arms and suddenly pulled Wang Xinyan into his embrace, hugging her tightly. Huang Xiaotao stood to the side and watched. Unknowingly, her eyes had turned red. It wasn't envy or jealousy, but happiness for the two of them. They were lovers. But after being teleported to Heavenly Island, they could only be apart from each other. Now, they could finally hold each other in their arms again. This passionate hug was something they had been waiting for more than a year. She hadn't been in contact with Wang Xinyan for a long time, but she knew that Wang Xinyan was just like Laner. They were very easy to get along with and very kind girl. To a certain extent, Wang Xinyan's personality was more similar to hers, and they had more in common. In fact, it had only been a short while since they'd met each other, and Wang Xinyan and Huang Xiaotao had already skipped the senior-junior relationship, going straight to calling each other sisters. After all, they were true sisters because of Lin Yi, and this level of relationship was even closer than if they were fellow disciples of the same sect. Under Huang Xiaotao's witness, Lin Yi and Wang Xinyan hugged each other tightly. It was as if they wanted to embed the other in their arms, unwilling to let go for a long time. The thousands of words they had to say after a year of separation were all in this one hug. This scene lasted for almost the time it took for a stick of incense to burn before the two reluctantly separated. There were tears in their eyes as they looked at each other and smiled. "All right, don't just stand there. Sit down and have some tea," Huang Xiaotao said with a smile. "All right." Lin Yi and Wang Xinyan looked at each other and smiled before taking their seats. Lin Yi couldn't hold back his curiosity any longer, so he skipped the greeting and turned to Wang Xinyan. "Speaking of which, how did you get to the Eastern continent? You even became the disciple of the Eastern Sea's divine nun. I was really shocked when I saw you. Lil Sistao told me everything. She said you were almost drooling just now." Xinyan covered her mouth with a smile before explaining the whole story. "I was actually teleported straight to the Eastern continent when we teleported up here." "What?" He couldn't help but be startled. He thought that the Eastern continent was so transcendent, filled with so many masters that even the other sky-class islands didn't have the right to go there, let alone the people from the common world. Floating astronomy. Chapter 43:23. Logically speaking, people from the secular world shouldn't be sent to such a place at all. Newcomers who were only at the great completion of the heaven stage were sent to the East continent, a place that even many golden core experts yearned for but couldn't go to. This really made people speechless. Speaking of luck, to a certain extent, they were indeed very lucky. However, this kind of good luck might not necessarily be a good thing for those who were directly involved in it. In terms of overall strength, the East continent is indeed much stronger than the other heaven stage islands, but there are still cultivator tribes at the bottom. Newcomers like us from the secular world can't enter the eyes of those sects and forces in the East continent at all. In the end, we can only be sent to the cultivator tribes, and many people even die on the way. Wang Xinyan sighed and explained to Lin Yi, "If that's the case, the East continent is a dangerous place for newcomers like us in the mortal world. In comparison, people like me who were sent to the North Island are like living in a greenhouse. I'm considered lucky." Lin Yi shook his head and sighed as well. Huang Xiaotao didn't interrupt, but she agreed with what he said. As far as she knew, the North Island had the most peaceful atmosphere among the Heaven Stage Islands, and the degree of danger was also the lowest. As for the other islands, the East continent itself was a mysterious place, and at the same time, it represented danger everywhere. As Wang Xinyan said, it was difficult for ordinary people to adapt here. The South continent was the territory of the spirit beasts, and the surrounding sea area was a chaotic territory of human cultivators. They fought back and forth, and blood flowed constantly. Although the West Island was a country of women, because the female cultivators were not strong enough, they often suffered from the invasion of some local powerful tribes in the surrounding sea area. They often confronted each other, and the situation was tense. The Middle Island was the center of the Heaven Stage Islands. All kinds of powerful sects and forces were entrenched in one place. Even if the Island Lord Pavilion was in charge, it was still inevitable that there would be frictions and disputes. Behind the rise and fall of every sect was the shadow of a sword, and blood flowed like a river. It was just that the Island Lord Pavilion had deliberately blocked the news. So in the end, the atmosphere in the North Island was the safest. After all, everything in the North Island was decided by the three great pavilions, and no other forces could compete with them. And between the three pavilions, although there would be competition from time to time, in general they would advance and retreat together, and there would not be too much internal friction. In this way, they could maintain a strong deterrent force, so that the various forces entrenched in the North Island would not dare to act rashly. For the weak rookies, the East continent is indeed not a good place. Back then, if Master hadn't gone to visit other academies and happened to pass by, I wouldn't have been able to find him. I wouldn't have lived to this day if I'd found out that I was a sponge, let alone standing here with you," Xinyan said, still shaken. This can also be considered as the will of the heavens. Lin Yi smiled and comforted her. However, there was still some lingering fear in his heart. If it weren't for the divine nun of the Eastern Sea, it was hard to say what would have happened to Wang Xinyan in a place like the Eastern continent. Yes, Master has always been very good to me. She treats me like her own daughter, doting on me no matter what. Linny, do you want to find a chance to meet her? Xinyan suggested. In her heart, the divine nun of the East Sea was her family. If she could be described as half a daughter to the divine nun of the East Sea, then Lin Yi would be half a son-in-law. A son-in-law and a mother-in-law had to see each other at the end of the day. Moreover, with the divine nun of the East Sea's strength and status, she felt like Lin Yi should be able to help out no matter what happened. I do. However, the time is not right. Let's wait until I am a bit stronger, Lin Yi said with a smile. He had managed to pull the wool over everyone's eyes after so much difficulty. If he were to meet the divine nun of the East Sea, who knew if she would see through him or not? What if she became interested in him again? Or if people like Ling Yuanqing and Wei Hebei found out? It would be troublesome. This, all right. Wang Xinyan could not help but be slightly taken aback. She was actually filled with hope that Lin Yi would go to Morning Star Academy with her using this rare opportunity. After all, Huang Xiaotao had already become a disciple of the divine nun of the Eastern Sea. She would never be at ease leaving Lin Yi alone in a place as chaotic as the Jinduan Sea realm. That's right. I still have a lot of unfinished business on the Northern Island, so I can't go to the East Continent for now. Once I've settled things here, I will go to the Morning Star Academy to find you too. Lin Yi nodded and promised. Then, you have to be careful when you're alone. As for me and Lil Sis Tao, no matter what happens, we'll always have Master protecting us. Usually we'll only stay in Morning Star Academy, don't worry. Xinyan didn't want him to leave, but since Lin Yi had said so, she wouldn't force him. Since Lin Yi had said that he would come to the East Continent to find the two of them, he would definitely come. It was just a little more time, and it was better than the previous year when they did not even know whether Lin Yi was alive or not, and they lived in fear. Well, you two take good care of yourselves. After returning to the academy, if you can find a way to write to me. Even if the letter can't reach the 3 pavilions of the North Island directly, you can still find a way to send the letter to the Hong's Chamber of Commerce. Xiaotao knows that as long as I tell a friend, no matter which branch of the Hong's Chamber of Commerce you send the letter to, you can finally send it to me. Lin Yi told the 2 girls. Putting aside the fact that Lin Yi was the honorary vice president of the Hong Chamber of Commerce, even if Hong Zhong was previously ostracized by others in the Middle Island headquarters, he was still the real vice president. Even if he could not get involved in big matters that concerned his interests, he could still borrow the internal channels of the Hong Chamber of Commerce to send the letter. That was a piece of cake for him. He just needed to tell the people in the East Continent about it. Wang Xinyan and Huang Xiaotao nodded repeatedly. Even if Lin Yi did not mention this, they would definitely find a way to send a letter to Lin Yi in the faraway Morning Star Academy in the East Continent. Even if they did not have any connections, they could at most ask the divine nun of the East Sea to do it for them. After all, the divine nun of the East Sea spoiled Wang Xinyan so much that she would definitely agree to such a small matter. Also, after going to Morning Star Academy, Xianyan helped me take care of Xiaotao. After all, it's her first time there, and she doesn't know a lot of the rules. Even if she doesn't go out and cause trouble, she might still be targeted. I'll leave everything to you. No matter what, you two are sisters. Lin Yi's face reddened as he spoke, but he still shamelessly instructed. Floating astronomy. Chapter 40, 324. Don't worry. I'll take good care of Lil Sis Xiaotao for you, even if you don't tell me. I promise that the next time you see her, she'll be chubby and fair, without a single strand of hair missing. Wang Xinyan nodded and teased. Huang Xiaotao couldn't help but shrink her neck a little shyly when she heard that, but she felt warm inside. Ever since she left the cultivator tribe all those years ago, it had been a long time since someone cared for her. Chubby and fair. Are you going to raise Xiaotao like a pig? Lin, he was speechless. HM, don't you like chubby and fair? I'll have to go on a diet then. Wang Xinyan glanced at Lin Yi flirtatiously. Even with Lin Yi's composure, he couldn't help but blush and his heart race. He almost couldn't control himself. After a year apart, this girl's charm had grown even more. There's no need for that. Sister Xinyan is so slim, even thinner than me. How can you be fat? Huang Xiaotao corrected him with a smile. Because her face had been disfigured and she spent most of her time out on training missions, she was already a skinnier beauty. But now that she stood next to Wang Xinyan, it was obvious that the latter was thinner. Over the past year, Wang Xinyan had been accepted as a disciple of the divine Nun of the Eastern Sea and lived a good life. But she had always been worried about Lin. She often worried about whether Lin was still alive or not, and whether he was having a hard time. Naturally, she couldn't be plump. Moreover, every female cultivator was an expert at maintaining their youthful looks. As long as they didn't want to be fat, they would never be able to get fat. It's actually good for the two of you to be a little fatter. Lin, he thought about it seriously and finally said, Yes, there's meat. In your dreams. The two girls blushed and spat at Lin Yi. Wang Xinyan then changed the topic. Right? How are the others apart from me? The people she was referring to. Naturally, it wouldn't be those unrelated passers-by, but Lin Yi's confidants, her sisters. So far, we've only found Tianchan and Sydney. They're both on Middle Island. The whereabouts of the others are still unknown. Lin Yi sighed and said helplessly, Don't worry, I'm sure they'll be fine. Xinyan said softly. Huang Xiaotao, on the other hand, was puzzled. Did Lin Yi have a lot of women other than Laner and Wang Xinyan? Listening to the meaning of these words, Tianchan and Sydney, whom he had never met before, seemed to be his sisters. Although she was taken aback, Huang Xiaotao did not feel jealous at all. She had been brought up in a patriarchal education since young, so the idea that a wife should follow her husband's lead had already been deeply ingrained in her. Even though she was already an early Golden Core expert and a direct disciple of the divine Nun of the East Sea, she did not find it inappropriate at all. She was just curious. I hope so. Lin nodded. In his heart, the pursuit of strength had become much more urgent. No matter where he went, strength was king. Lin Yi's current strength was much stronger than when he first came to Heavenly Island. It was already tens or even hundreds of times stronger than before. However, if he wanted to rely on it to roam the world and find his lovers, and even go one step further to save the unconscious inheritors' girlfriends and pangolins, he would have to rely on it. But it was far from enough. They had been waiting for each other for more than a year, and now they were finally reunited again. But soon after, they had to face the separation of worlds apart. Lin Yi, Wang Xinyan, and Huang Xiaotao really did not want to be separated. However, the time they spent together was always so short. The three of them clearly felt like they had only spoken a few words. Before they could properly savor the joy of reunion, the sky outside had already darkened. The rather empty streets were once again drowned out by the hustle and bustle of the crowd. This meant that the selection for the Morning Star Academy had come to an end. Of course, this was a grand gathering of over 10,000 people. Even if the selection process was extremely simple, with sufficient manpower and strict order to ensure the efficiency of the selection, it was impossible for the selection to be completed in a day. Even if they went on day and night, it would still take a few days at the very least. However, Wang Xinyan and Huang Xiaotao could not stay outside any longer. They had to return to the inn before the sky darkened, or the divine Nun of the East Sea might cause some trouble if she did not see them. After all, one of them had a sponge body, while the other was a perfect Golden Core cultivator with dual elemental fire and wind spiritual roots. They were both extremely talented, and it would not be an exaggeration to say that they were the treasures of the entire Morning Star Academy. Once the two of them went missing, let alone the divine nun of the East Sea, even people like Ling Yuanqing would probably turn the entire city upside down. He was extremely reluctant to part with them, but Lin Yi could only part with them in the end. He had always been calm, but before he left, he became rather garrulous. He gave them instructions again and again, which made the two of them laugh. As Lin Yi's confidants, they really did not know that Lin Yi had a side like that. As they laughed, Wang Xinyan and Huang Xiaodao's hearts warmed up. No matter how long they waited or missed him, it was all worth it to be able to make Lin Yi care about them so much. After parting at the Swallowwater Tea House, Lin Yi found a nearby inn to stay in. Although it was still overcrowded, there were still some empty rooms because many people were waiting in the square overnight for the selection. Otherwise, Lin Yi would have been forced to sleep on the streets, now that the dock was sealed off. In the next few days, Lin Yi completely settled down in the inn. He basically did not leave at all, nor did he go to see Wang Xinyan and Huang Xiaodao. It was as if he had vanished from the face of the earth. Although Lin Yi really wanted to spend more time with Wang Xinyan and Huang Xiaotao before they left Xinduan City, logic told him that in this situation, the less contact he had with the two of them, the better. Needless to say, Wang Xinyan was the center of attention no matter where she went. As for Huang Xiaotao, although she was not as eye-catching as Wang Xinyan, her dual affinity for fire and wind was widely known. Moreover, she had been accepted as the direct disciple of the divine nun of the Eastern Sea, a powerhouse of the mountain opening period. She was the new star of the academy. Moreover, during the selection, the relationship between Lin Yi and Huang Xiaotao had been seen by everyone present. To be honest, if he continued to be seen with Huang Xiaotao, he was really afraid that some idiots would cause trouble for him, especially those from the Morning Star Academy. After all, the nascent soul stage guards that he had seen before were all temporary disciples of the academy. According to Gawei, none of these people were easy to deal with. The School Bell's personal expert tribe has an activity going on. QQ membership is waiting for you to get it. Enter the activity on QQ on your phone. Interest tribe. Search for this book and follow it. Floating astronomy. Chapter 43:25. There was no guarantee that there would not be people forming cliques to make trouble for him because of Huang Xiaotao. Once things got out of hand, there would definitely be new problems. This was the last thing Lin Yi wanted to see right now. As a result, it was better to keep a low profile for now. If those people could not find him, there would naturally be no trouble. They could not make trouble for Huang Xiaotao anyway. With Wang Xinyan watching from the side, if they dared to pester Huang Xiaotao, the divine nun of the Eastern Sea would probably suppress them in a matter of minutes. Ling Yuanqing and the others would not have any objections. However, even if he hid in the inn, Lin Yi could not just sit around and do nothing. He was in a hurry to increase his strength. To him, the best way to increase his strength was to refine a golden core. Apart from treasures like the star ink milk and the infant ginseng, he also had the 2 golden core fruits of Myriad Crossing that he had obtained from the man in gray. The fruit wasn't very useful to Xinyan, who was at the initial phase of the nascent soul stage, but to Huang Xiaotao, who was also at the initial phase of the golden core stage, it was a great item that could quickly increase her strength. Lin Yi had planned to leave both fruits for Xiaotao, but Xinyan stopped him. A golden core is very rare for regular people, but it's basically something easily obtainable for our establishing mountain master. She's already prepared it, so Sister Xiaotao doesn't have to worry about it at all. It's unnecessary for you to give it to her. You might as well keep it for yourself. Those were Wang Xinyan's exact words. If it were not for the fact that she did not have any decent heavenly resources on her, she probably would have given them all to Lin Yi instead. She was the divine nun of the Eastern Sea's beloved disciple after all. With 2 golden core fruits of Myriad Crossing, Lin Yi was confident he could refine 2 golden cores if nothing went wrong. If he was lucky, he might even make more. However, he still had to gather other supplementary spiritual herbs before that. After all, the golden core fruit of Myriad Crossing was only the main material for refining a golden core. After going up to the Heaven Stage Island, after more than a year of deliberate cultivation, the storage of elixirs in the space of Lin Yi's jade pendant had already begun to take shape. Not only did it cover many common elixirs, but also some rare elixirs on the market. Now he planned to refine golden elixirs. Just relying on Lin Yi's own reserves, he would be able to meet 70 to 80% of his needs. As for the rest of the spiritual herbs, Lin Yi believed that they could be replenished at the spiritual herb stores and the Chamber of Commerce in Jun, Duan City. He just needed to make a trip outside. For safety's sake, Lin Yi put on the 1,000 silk mask before he went out and changed back to Wu Fu's appearance. This was a completely unfamiliar face in Jianduan City, so no one would be suspicious. As expected, Lin Yi's appearance as a martial artist was too common and too ordinary, especially in Jianduan City where experts gathered. This kind of ordinary martial artist who didn't look like a genius wouldn't catch the attention of the people around him. They didn't even bother to take another look at him, let alone pay attention to him. After successfully replenishing the remaining spiritual herbs, Lin Yi recuperated and immediately began to refine the golden elixirs. With his previous experience, Lin Yi was familiar with refining the golden elixirs again. Coupled with the automatic alchemy of the divine armament cauldron, accidents could be avoided to a great extent. This time was no exception. The entire refining process was under Lin Yi's control from beginning to end, and finally the best quality golden elixirs were successfully produced. However, what made Lin Yi slightly regretful was that there were only 2. Although there were often surprises when refining the Foundation establishment pill in the past, looking back, whether it was the 2 10,000 crossing golden elixir fruits that Lin Yi found from the man in gray, or the auxiliary materials he bought later, the quality could only be regarded as average. In this case, it was already quite rare to be able to successfully produce 2 best quality golden elixirs. It was impossible to produce more than this. There was no such good thing in the world. Looking at the 2 freshly refined, best quality golden elixirs in his hands, Lin Yi was a little excited. To be honest, because of Wang Xinyan and the stimulation of so many super experts in Morningstar Academy, his desire for strength was much stronger than ever. Moreover, now that Huang Shaodao was gone, it meant that the strongest Frenzy Fire 8 trigrams palm strike could no longer be used. This was like suddenly breaking an arm. Even if Lin Yi had other powerful trump cards, he still couldn't help but feel a little uncomfortable and even a little afraid. After all, in terms of strength, he was only in the early golden core stage. Whether it was the Jianduan Sea or the Wei Arc Sea, they were all places where dragons and snakes mingled. There were many nascent soul stage masters everywhere. Lin Yi's strength was simply not enough. If he really encountered trouble, it would even be a problem for him to protect himself. Now that the best quality golden elixir was ready, he didn't have the slightest bit of hesitation. Holding his breath and concentrating, he swallowed the best quality golden elixir. Lin Yi suddenly felt as if the meridians in his body had been ignited in an instant. It began to burn violently, and the pain was unbearable. Pain leads to impassibility. This saying was also applicable on the path of cultivation. Once the meridians in the body were in pain, it meant that they were undergoing a transformation. Perhaps they were growing stronger, or perhaps they were going berserk. It was just a matter of degree. Lin Yi had already used the golden elixir once before, but at that time it was to break through to the golden core stage. Moreover, it was a perfect breakthrough with the help of the starring stone. That kind of earth-shattering change was completely different from this kind of simple leveling up. At that time, the thing that brought the greatest pain to Lin Yi was the starring stone, but now it was simply the burning of his meridians. However, When he really experienced it, the feeling now was not much better than that time. However, Lin Yi could only silently clench his teeth and endure it. He didn't dare to be discouraged because, at this moment, the true qi in his meridians had skyrocketed. Once he was discouraged, it would easily lead to serious consequences. Once it was out of control, it was not impossible for it to evolve into berserk. This kind of burning went on for a full 4 hours. Even with Lin Yi's endurance, he began to feel a little overwhelmed. The burning pain in his meridians finally began to slowly weaken. When it completely returned to normal, Lin Yi suddenly discovered that his meridians were actually a lot stronger than before, and the degree of the true qi was also more abundant than before. This realm is... Feeling the new and powerful strength in his body, Lin Yi was immediately stunned. He cried out in disbelief, "Middle golden core stage!" He had clearly only used one golden elixir. Even if it was of the best quality, Lin Yi originally did not think that he could break through to a higher realm. In his original expectations, if he could reach the peak of the early golden core stage, it would be considered a great success. Floating astronomy. Chapter 43:26. But now he didn't expect to advance 2 levels in a row, from the early stage of the gold core realm to the middle stage of the gold core realm. Lin Yi was stunned for a long time, and finally let out a long breath. He finally understood the cause and effect. He muttered to himself, "No wonder it hurt for so long just now, and no wonder I was stuck at the threshold of the early stage of the gold core realm and couldn't break through. It turns out to be so." As the strongest master of the gold core realm who had a perfect breakthrough, in theory at least in the entire gold core realm, he could advance quickly with irresistible force, but Lin Yi had been stuck at the threshold of the early stage of the gold core realm. In fact, Lin Yi had accumulated a lot of combat experience during this period. From the inner core competition of the 3 pavilions in the North Island to the various encounters after he left the South Island, he had faced either masters of the gold core realm or masters of the nascent soul realm, and each of them was stronger than the other. Logically speaking, even if it was a bottleneck, it should have been loosened long ago, but there was no sign of it for so long. As a result, after taking the supreme grade gold core realm, he directly broke through to the middle stage of the gold core realm, which was really a joke of fate. Lin Yi thought to himself that it was probably because he had reached the point long ago, but he lacked an opportunity to break through. Now, because he took the supreme grade gold core realm, this opportunity was just triggered. Coupled with the effect of the gold core realm itself, it was reasonable for him to advance 2 levels in a row. In the face of this unexpected joy, Lin Yi, who was still a little depressed, suddenly cheered up. Masters of the gold core realm with a perfect gold core realm were superior to ordinary masters of the gold core realm. With his current strength of the middle stage of the gold core realm, even if he directly faced an ordinary master of the gold core realm, he would absolutely suppress him in all aspects. And if he used his strongest trump card, Lin Yi had a strong feeling that even if he was alone, he could defeat a master of the nascent soul realm. Feeling the surging new power in his body, Lin Yi looked at the remaining supreme grade gold core realm and was a little tempted. He believed that with his potential as a master of the gold core realm, he should be able to advance 1 more level. He might be able to level up if he continued, but he suppressed the tempting thought in the end. Although it was gratifying to advance a step further, the path of cultivation paid particular attention to moderation. If one blindly sought speed, going too far would be as bad as falling short. No matter how powerful and harmless the effects of the pills were, they were only supplementary items in the end. Only the results of cultivation that could be achieved through constant dripping would be the true foundation. Although he successfully broke through to the middle stage of the gold core realm, it was better to stay in the inn and stabilize his strength. Instead, he decided to stay in the inn and continue his closed-door training. He'd already told Wang Xinyan and Huang Xiaotao that instead of taking the risk to look for them, He'd rather stay in the inn and stabilize his strength. When he became stronger in the future, he wouldn't have to worry about not having a chance to meet them. For a couple of days, he didn't step out of the house until he felt that the pure energy in his body had returned to normal, and his strength had completely stabilized. He finally walked out of his room for the first time, planning to go out for some fresh air. This time he Thousand Realm in Core Realm. Lin Thousand. Stage of the stage of Realm. Lin Realm. Stage. Soul. Realm. Lin Stage. Stage. Peak. Stage. Peak. Core. The inn that he stayed in was not a simple inn. It was actually quite a big restaurant. It was quite famous in the whole of Jianduan City. The first and second floors were places to eat and drink. Only the third floor was used as a rest area. He ordered a few signature dishes and sat down by the window. He looked at the scenery outside the window while eating the signature dishes. It was a rare opportunity for him to relax. It had to be said that the taste of the restaurant's signature dishes was really good. It was famous for a variety of seafood. It was a local dish of the Jianduan Sea in the southern continent. It was different from anything that he had eaten before. It was spicy and fragrant. He sat alone, at a table not far behind him. There were two men drinking with each other. He inadvertently glanced at them and felt that they looked familiar. However, he could not remember where he had seen them before. Big brother, the people from Morning Star Academy should have already left. Why is the pier still under martial law, causing our cargo to be stuck here? We've been holding it for almost a month now. It's really *ket up. One of the green-robed men cursed. I'm also puzzled about this. They've already left. Why is there still a martial law? But I reckon that it should be open again in 2 days. The other man in black said as he drank. Hearing the familiar voices of the two, Lin Yi's heart jumped. He secretly examined the strength of the two. They were both at the peak of the late gold core stage. There was no mistake. These two were the pirates that had robbed the goods. There were 4 experts at the peak of the late gold core stage who had robbed the goods, and the two behind him were 2 of them. Although he did not have a deep impression of this group of pirates because he had not fought with them, but it had not been a long time. He could not recognize them even though he was sitting so close to them. Moreover, the meaning of the two's words was that the goods that had been robbed had not been disposed of. But he clearly remembered that after this group of pirates left them at the pier, they should have left Jianduan City. Why did they come back now? With Lin Yi's current strength, not to mention 2 experts at the peak of the late gold core stage, even if all 4 of them came together, he would not be a problem. At this moment, he did not have the slightest bit of fear. He simply continued to eat quietly while listening to the conversation of the two. Damn it! Although it was very smooth this time, and those 4 cowards were tactful and did not resist at all. But after that we were really unlucky. We had already set sail, but we were forced back by the storm. Just when the weather was slightly better, the people from Morning Star Academy came and sealed the pier. The man in green was speechless as he drank his wine. These words answered Lin Yi's doubts. It turned out that this group of people had been forced back by the storm. No wonder they were still stuck here, even though they had already left. All right, second brother, you don't have to complain anymore. You've said this dozens of times already. I've heard it so many times that my ears have grown calluses. This is called the road to happiness is strewn with setbacks, do you understand? Wait until we give this batch of goods to Shopkeeper Way. Think about the reward we agreed on before. TSK, let alone a month. Even if we were delayed for half a year, it would still be worth it. The man in black laughed as he comforted him. Shopkeeper Wei? Could it be Wei Xiaodong from the Hong Merchant Association? When Lin Yi heard this, he suddenly quivered. But after thinking about it carefully, he felt that it was not possible. This goods was entrusted to the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency by Wei Xiaodong himself. There was no reason for him to find someone to rob his goods. It should just be that they had the same surname. Floating astronomy. Chapter 43:27. That's true. Once this deal is done, the four of us will be able to enjoy ourselves for a few years. The man in green was elated and sighed. TSK, us brothers have worked so hard and risked our lives to do this kind of shady business, but we still can't earn as much as Manager Wei. That's right, it's his own goods. Not only did he take it back, he could also demand a sky-high compensation from the escort agency. Moreover, no one could find fault with him, and they would even have to bow and apologize to him. Doing a business that costs nothing, yet he's so favored. I'm starting to wonder if he's in the same line of work as us. The man in black chuckled. Although they were surrounded by outsiders who were eating and drinking, he still dared to say such words in such an occasion. Moreover, the people around him did not show any strange expressions when they heard him. It was clear that the chaotic situation in the Jinduan Sea was no longer strange, and they were already used to such things. However, when Lin Yi heard this, he was completely shocked. He did not expect the mastermind to be Wei Xiaodong himself. Before this, Lin Yi had always found it strange. The route they took to escort the goods was very well hidden, and outsiders could not possibly know about it, especially with the thick sea fog. If they had not known about the route beforehand, the possibility of these pirates discovering the cargo ship in the thick sea fog was almost zero. However, the truth was that these pirates had been waiting for the right opportunity. They did not even hesitate to chase after them. When Lin Yi and the others delivered the goods to their doorstep, they immediately rushed forward to take it. The process could only be described with one word: clean and tidy. Lin Yi did not expect this to be the cause of the problem. It turned out that from the beginning to the end, it was all part of the Hong Consortium's plan, swallowing their own goods and then looking for compensation from the escort agency. This could no longer be considered an ordinary mole. This was Wei Xiaodong digging a pit and teasing the Heavens Equal Escort Agency to jump into it. After the deed was done, he could still claim righteousness and ask for an apology. Moreover, he had also buried Lin Yi and the others in the pit. Lin Yi had never imagined that Wei Xiaodong, the manager of the Hong Chamber of Commerce's branch in the Weyark territorial waters, would be such a despicable and shameless person. This was an old friend that Hong Zhong had solemnly introduced to him. With a precedent like Nakajima Kai Zhongyang, Lin Yi thought that Hong Zhong's friends would all be like this, but he didn't expect Wei Xiaodong's character to be so corrupted. It could be seen that even someone as experienced and prudent as Hong Zhong would sometimes make a mistake. But thinking back, when he introduced Wei Xiaodong to Lin Yi, Hong Zhong also said that although he and Wei Xiaodong were old friends, they had not seen each other for a long time. People would always change. After a long time, Wei Xiaodong would be blinded by benefits. It wasn't a big deal. Since that was the case, there was no need for Lin Yi to give this guy any face. According to the original plan, he was going to wait for the dock to lift the ban and then directly return to the Weyark Sea. But now he was going to change his mind. If he hadn't met these two pirates, Lin Yi planned to go out for a walk after eating. After all, it was rare to come to Jinduan City. But now he had given up this idea. He was going to keep a close eye on the two pirates behind him. Lin Yi ate silently in front of him, after waiting for the two people behind him to take further action. After half an hour, the two finally had their fill. "Second brother, I will go back to my room first. You go to the dock and replace third brother and fourth brother. Let them come out to relax, have a drink, and have a meal, so that they don't complain behind my back." After the man in black instructed, he got up and went upstairs. Lin Yi couldn't help but be taken aback. Looking at this posture, it seemed that this person was staying in the same inn as him. No wonder he met him here. The old saying was right. Enemies often cross each other's path. Although the man in black was a little reluctant, He still did as he was told and got up to go out. The corner of Lin Yi's mouth lifted slightly. He quietly locked the man in black with his divine sense and then got up to go out. The other party was a master at the peak of the late gold core stage. But in front of Lin Yi, who was at the middle gold core stage, he was not an ant. He was really not an opponent. He was just a weak existence that could be killed in seconds. Even if he was locked by Lin Yi's divine sense, the man in black did not notice it at all from beginning to end. He came all the way to the dock and flipped over into a cargo ship. Lin Yi took a closer look. This cargo ship was extremely familiar. It was indeed the one he used to deliver the goods. But the unique logo of the Equal Heaven Escort Agency was erased from the bow. If it was just an ordinary cargo ship, it could be stored in the dock next to the dock during the period of martial law. There was no need to specially leave people to guard here. However, these guys had a guilty conscience. It was a cargo ship that was robbed halfway, and they were counting on the goods on board to make a big profit. Naturally, they would not be at ease. Lin waited at a distance outside the dock. Anyway, with his divine sense locked, he was not afraid that these guys would escape. After a while, 2 men came down from the cargo ship. They were the other 2 pirates who robbed the goods together. They were the 3rd and 4th brother that the man in black had mentioned. The 2 walked out of the dock, talking and laughing. It was obvious that they were looking for a place to relax. In other words, on the cargo ship at this moment, only the man in black was left. Seeing this, Lin Yi smiled slightly and walked to the front of the cargo ship. With a little force from his feet, he jumped onto the deck. Immediately, Lin Yi walked straight to the cabin. Relying on his divine sense, he knew that the man in black was inside. "Why are you back again? Didn't I tell you to go eat?" Since Lin Yi did not hide at all, his footsteps were clearly heard by the man in black. But he thought that it was the 3rd or 4th brother who turned around and came back. At this moment, the man in black was lying on a wooden bed. He crossed his legs and drank a little wine leisurely. He was enjoying himself and closed his eyes to rest. "No need. I have already eaten, and I ate with you." Lin Yi's mouth raised a playful smile. "Who?" The man in black was stunned for a moment before he reacted. Suddenly he was shocked. His aura of the peak of the late stage of gold core was revealed. He pointed at Lin Yi and said, "Who are you? How dare you come on my ship so casually? Don't you want your life? Oh, are you sure this ship is yours?" Lin Yi couldn't help but smile. He leaned against the door calmly and said, "But as far as I know, this ship doesn't seem to be yours? This is the Equal Heaven Escort Agency, right? Or did you join the escort agency?" You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.